Good morning, Winnipeg. Good morning, Manitoba. For all those joining us live this morning on our YouTube channel and all of our social media platforms, we say good morning, universe, and welcome to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Alongside Dave Minuk, alongside Ezra Ginsburg, I am your host, Drew Mindell. A very busy Saturday morning in store for you. Expansion draft submission of the protected list day. All the lists from all 30 NHL teams, not including the Golden Knights, of course, have to be into the NHL by 5 p.m. Eastern time. There's a roster freeze, a trade freeze. That happens, I believe, at 2 o'clock Central time this morning. This afternoon, rather. It's going to be a very busy day, a very busy week, a very busy couple of weeks in the NHL. We'll bring it all to you here on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show and the Illegal Curve YouTube channel. David wearing the Dodgers hat, Ezzy wearing the Blue Jays hat. Me, I'm wearing just a bald wig is actually what I'm wearing. Nice to see you, gentlemen. How you guys doing on this Saturday morning?
Yeah, I think you're going to have to start wearing baseball caps, Drew, just because it seems like, that's what Dave and I are doing every week. Dave started that years ago, but I'm getting into the habit of pulling out. I got this one in Toronto in 2016 when Dave M and I were covering the draft in Buffalo. We got to check out a Blue Jays game. I know you have a few hats, but I guess you just like the sleek look. But yeah, as you said,
I can
guys,
put the wig back on if you want.
Yeah, get that wig on.
Never. No.
People want to see the wig.
People want to. We'll let people in the chat decide if they want to see the wig or not. If they do, maybe I'll throw the wig on for when our buddy Sean Reynolds, when Rennie joins us in about 30 minutes time.
Free the wig, Drew.
Free the wig. Dave saw the wig live and in action after the triple overtime game, but I don't think anybody else necessarily needs or wants to see the wig.
That's been.
I'll be honest. I was a little bit concerned with Drew's mental health when he put that wig on Dave. Like I was sleeping. I think it was about 2 a.m. when that happened. But I was just, I had to check in with Drew, just make sure that everything was okay after he donned that wig after the game.
Yeah, I don't think anybody. Yeah, the wig may have been a cry for help. There's no arguing about that. Let's get right into it. Let's get started on this Saturday morning. There's a lot to talk about. And, we went back. I went back into some of the old show plans. It was about 8 weeks ago when we first started talking about this. The question as it pertains to the expansion draft and the Jets' protection of the defense. And the question was DeMello or Stanley. And that is still the question that is on the top of the mind of every Jets fan as the protected lists need to be submitted later on this morning. And then we expect them to be released to the public tomorrow. DeMello or Stanley. And all indications right now, as we sit here at 9:04 a.m. on Saturday, the 17th of July, all indications appear to be that it's going to be Logan Stanley over Dylan DeMello. So let's get, I guess, your first thoughts on that. If the Jets choose Stanley over DeMello, what is your immediate thought? I'll start with you, Ezzy.
Yeah, well, you're right. And, it's not really surprising because, as you said, we've been talking about this for over a month now, that really the tough decision was between Stanley and DeMello. Everybody knew guys, Morrissey and Pionk, were going to be protected, right? Like that was not a question. Everybody knew those guys were going to be 2 of the 3 defensemen because we already knew that the Jets weren't going to most likely protect 4 defensemen because they have more than 4 forwards that they need to protect, right? So I think you're going to see, a few other teams go with that. Nashville is a team that we've talked about that might protect 4 defensemen, which means they can only protect 4 forwards. But it obviously means that Dylan DeMello is going to be exposed guys. And I think, the big question is Kevin Cheveldayoff going to swing a deal with Seattle in order to avoid losing Dylan DeMello? And then the other question is, if Chevy isn't able to swing a deal to ensure that Dylan DeMello, isn't selected by Seattle, it's are the Jets going to sign or trade for to bring in on the right side? Because if they lose DeMello, there's a big hole on the right side. We've talked about it. I mean, I think that, with Ville Heinola, a good chance of him playing a full-time role in the NHL. You've got Dylan Sandberg there. Dave's talked about it. You even got Declan Chisholm, who's a couple of years away. I mean, you're much stronger organizationally on the left side. So if you lose DeMello, I mean, there is going to be a void in the top 4, right? Like you've got Neil Pionk there, who's obviously in your top 4. But so, I mean, it is a little bit surprising when you consider that the Jets made that 4-year investment for DeMello, but you'd have to think that, a big consideration here, guys, is if you leave Logan Stanley unprotected, you're going to have to give up more in order to ensure that Seattle doesn't take him. So, yeah, I'm a little bit surprised that it looks like, Stanley is going to be the guy, but I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility, Drew, that, the Seattle Kraken take Mason Appleton and the Jets, swing some type of deal involving draft picks to ensure that the Kraken don't take DeMello.
Well, let me get Dave in here on that conversation. So as he brought up the subject matter of, you're going to expose one of DeMello or Stanley, but do you think that the Kraken are more likely to take Mason Appleton, or do you think they're more likely to take whomever the Jets expose on the back end, Dave?
Well, I mean, it's interesting because I think a lot of people naturally are focused only on what's happening here in Winnipeg, and they don't look at what the rest of the league is doing. And so are there a number of defensemen that are better than who the Jets may leave exposed, and not as many forwards? And that seems to be the way it is looking. And it looks like Mason Appleton could actually be a pretty nice prize for a team, because he's the guy who's shown he has the ability to kind of increase his role when given the opportunity, had more PK role, had more power play time. And I think, it's interesting. I was reading, and it's in the papers today, one of the Seattle it's in the morning papers, and one of the Seattle papers was writing about the Seattle Times, was doing a Q&A, and they were asking about players who have untapped potential, because Dave Haxtell is working with prospects. And Mason Appleton was the first player listed. So Mason Appleton is a player I think people need to realize is, he was a steal as a 2015 6th rounder. But like I said, and it's funny because I've watched him since he first broke into the league as a pro with the Manitoba Moose on the fourth line, worked his way up to being a first line player with the Manitoba Moose, and then has increased his role with the Jets when given the opportunity. He's a player who a team could really set their sights on, and so that's one player I think people need to really focus on is Mason Appleton. I think he's a guy, when you look at around the league, and we don't know. The problem is we don't know, right? We'll know tomorrow when the league is supposed to release all 30 NHL teams lists, what guys are going to actually ultimately. So it's all speculation, right? But based on what it seems to suggest, there are equal defensemen to who's out there right now. And so I think that if you leave Mason Appleton exposed, there's a very good chance that Seattle is going to take Mason Appleton over either Logan Stanley or Dylan DeMello. So we in Winnipeg are so focused on the DeMello versus Stanley debate. I think Appleton is actually the guy who, if I'm Seattle, I'm probably targeting based on, again, speculation by me, who the other defensemen are that could be exposed and could be out there for Seattle to take. Now, Seattle could pull a Vegas and load up on defensemen in order to trade them and use them as assets, because we saw that's what Vegas did. And we know how premium defensemen are. So it's always a possibility. But I think if you have a player like Appleton who could provide potentially even top 6 minutes for Seattle, there's a good chance that he could be the guy that they're targeting. And I'm not trying to walk away from that DeMello versus Stanley debate. I just think it's a player that, because we're so focused on defense here in Winnipeg, everybody's kind of ignoring the fact that there's 29 other teams that are going to have to leave the defensemen exposed. And are those defensemen better than Stanley and DeMello? And the reality is there are some that are going to be out there that, again, like I said, Seattle would probably choose.
So the Jets obviously have no control unless they make a side deal. And they have no control over what Seattle's going to do. They have no control over what any of the other teams are going to do in terms of their protected lists. But I look at this Jets roster today, and I think back to, it was just last year the Jets made a sizable commitment to Dylan DeMello. And it was just a couple months ago we saw how good Dylan DeMello played with Josh Morrissey. He made Josh Morrissey better. When he went down in the first game against Montreal, the first shift of that first game, the Jets defense basically was done for the rest of that series, with all the other factors, added in there as well. From my perspective, I just don't know how you can look at DeMello today and Stanley today. And I know you're projecting out what Stanley might be, but I just don't see how the Jets can give up, can leave Dylan DeMello exposed, even with the risk that you might lose Logan Stanley. I know what you're saying, Dave, about Appleton might be the apple, pardon the pun, of the eye of the Seattle Kraken, regardless of who the Jets leave exposed. But from the Jets' perspective, leaving DeMello exposed and potentially losing him. And I do think the Jets would lose DeMelo if he's available.
I agree. Yeah.
Over Appleton. I think the Kraken would take DeMelo over Appleton. I don't know that they would necessarily take Stanley over Appleton. I just look at this Jets defense and I say that's probably the right side would probably be the worst right side in the entire NHL. And Dylan DeMelo makes the Winnipeg Jets better and he makes his defensive partner better. You can't say the same right now about Logan Stanley. That to me is the deciding factor between DeMelo and Stanley.
Right. If you're looking, 5 years down the road, then yeah, Logan Stanley has the higher upside just based on age and everything like that. But I think, when you consider the cap hit as well, guys, right? Like 3 years left at $3 million per year AAV, that's a really good cap hit for a guy that you can plug in your top four, who obviously, isn't a guy that you're expecting big offensive totals from, but he's a guy that, is very dependable, right? So there's a reason why the Jets gave him that 4-year contract. They really like what they saw a couple of years ago. So we know Seattle is going to have, a lot of good defensemen to choose from, right, guys? Like, Mark Giordano is a guy that the Flames are expected to expose, right? And obviously, Giordano is a guy that comes with a high price tag. But there's no shortage of good defensemen, that will be available for them, right? Like Justin Schultz is another guy, from Washington who's expected to be, left unprotected, right? So like, there's going to be a lot of good defensemen. I mean, you even hear talk like a guy like Brent Burns could be left exposed by San Jose. And again, like, Burns is a guy who, what's his salary? What does he make? Around $9 million a year, I believe. So, ticket. I mean, it's a big ticket, but I mean, the point is there's going to be lots of good veteran defensemen to choose from. But even with that, I think to have a guy on a low AAV, like $3 million, guys, is close to the league average. So even if he's a third pairing defenseman for you, I mean, he's most likely
going to be.
No, he'll most likely be in the top four. But all I'm saying is, like, he's a guy that for sure, at the very least, is going to be a top 6 defenseman for the Kraken if they choose him and protect him. But, Dave's right. I mean, we are fixated on defense and which defenseman the Jets could lose. But all I'm going to say is there is a chance that there is a side deal between the Jets and the Kraken. So again, just because the Jets leave DeMelo unprotected doesn't mean that he's necessarily going to be selected by the Kraken. Not only could the Kraken take a forward like, Mason Appleton or even Jansen Harkins, even though we think it's going to be Appleton, I mean, there's always the potential for that side deal, because back in 2017, guys, we didn't see that deal coming. Nobody thought Chris Thorburn was going to be the guy that the Vegas Golden Knights chose over Toby Enstrom. So, another guy that I heard out there as a kind of joke that would, surprise everybody is, what if the Kraken take Sami Niku? Wouldn't that be funny?
Sure. I mean, look, it's certainly possible, but you talk about a side deal, and a lot of people in the chat are talking about a side deal, and I love the conversation that's going on in the chat right now with, really some good points being made. You'll see them on the screen. I think the cost for the Jets to protect Dylan DeMelo in a side deal is a lot higher than the cost to protect Logan Stanley in a side deal. If the Jets expose DeMelo and they say to Ron Francis, we want to make a deal so you don't take DeMelo, I think the cost is a lot higher than if you make the same argument with Logan Stanley. Look, I know Logan Stanley is a former first-round pick. I know Logan Stanley is got the size that nobody else on the Jets have. But Dylan DeMelo, and you can't look strictly at his offensive numbers. That's not where he's going to perform. But for a Jets team that lacks defensively, especially in their own zone, and they lack high quality defensive defensemen, Dylan DeMelo is what you have. He's right there. I just don't know how you can turn your back on him, right now, given the way the rest of your roster is shaking up.
He's arguably sorry, Dave, I was just going to say he's arguably the Jets' second best defenseman right now. Right, like I think we'd all agree Neil Pionk is most likely the Jets' best defenseman, and all due respect to Josh Morrissey, that has a little bit to do with the way this season went. Morrissey's obviously in the conversation for a top 2 defenseman on the Jets, but you're right, Drew. Like, I mean, DeMelo's importance can't be understated. Not having him in the series against Montreal severely crippled the Winnipeg Jets. So, and again, I wouldn't look at it, Drew, like, the Jets are turning their back on him necessarily, just because the Jets have to expose someone, right? Like, we know they're not going 4 forwards and 4 defensemen. So that means, unfortunately, one guy has to be left unprotected. But I'm going to be fascinated to see, if the Jets have a move involving draft picks or players, because I don't necessarily think that it's a foregone conclusion that the Kraken take DeMello.
Well, and so that before we get Dave in here, I want to remind everybody that's joining us this morning. Wednesday night, we will have a special Illegal Curve expansion draft broadcast. While the expansion draft is going on, we're going to be live back here on our YouTube channel, on our Twitter feed, on our Facebook page, wherever you're joining us. Come back Wednesday night, a special Illegal Curve expansion draft broadcast, live reaction, live analysis to all the picks being made as the Seattle Kraken join the NHL as the 32nd team. So that's going to be Wednesday night, probably starting right around 7:15, 7:30, right around that time period. Join us back here on our YouTube channel, all of our social media platforms, for a special expansion draft broadcast of the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Go ahead, Dave.
Well, I mean, I just have to, a lot of people are throwing down on Dylan DeMello, and I think that, Drew's made the point, Ezzy's made the point, but I'll just reiterate it. Who are you replacing him with? Who's coming? I mean, people are just, you'll replace him with a free agent. Really? Have you seen Winnipeg's track record right now in replacing free agents? So, let's not be so casual here with a guy who committed to staying in Winnipeg. And just because a guy committed to staying in Winnipeg doesn't mean you keep him. But his numbers are very good. And I'm not talking about his offensive numbers. His defensive numbers are excellent. Logan Stanley, and let's remind everyone that nobody backed Logan Stanley in this city more than me, as someone who watched him every single game in the minors that he played. So I'm not here to dump on Logan Stanley, but if you look at his minutes that he played, they were fairly sheltered in the NHL. So he had
that's an understatement.
Yeah, so he had sheltered minutes in the NHL. And again, I've said, when we had a call-in show on 1290 and someone said, is Logan Stanley a bust because you're still playing in the AHL? I said, no. I think Logan Stanley is a third, maybe a second pairing defenseman when he gets to the NHL, That was my viewpoint. Now, you could argue that Dylan DeMello is expendable. I don't think he is. I think he makes Josh Morrissey a better defenseman. People say, well, who cares if he does? Well, it's kind of important because that's who you have. But again, ultimately what it comes down to is, what do you have in the cupboard? What do you have in the minors to replace these guys? And the Jets have nobody on the right side. Johnny Kovacevic, who I am also a big proponent of, 6'5", right shot defenseman, and just finished his second year pro, 38 minutes in one game for the Manitoba Moose. I really like Johnny Kovacevic. I think he's going to be a really good defenseman potentially for the Winnipeg Jets. But I would just suggest that he needs, he could use maybe another year in the AHL. If he jumps to the NHL, great. That's good. That's good on him. He had a good summer. He knew what he needed to do, and he took advantage of it. The point I'm trying to make is that other than Johnny, you don't have anybody on the right side. So if you lose Dylan DeMello, this is what people have to realize. If you lose Dylan DeMello, first of all, we're Winnipeg. So you have to remember, it's not like, you're getting any free agent that's out there. That there's 29 other teams that are trying to get free agents sometimes. It's not that easy. It's not that simple to just replace a guy. And more importantly, you're not replacing him from the Moose. And that's generally what the Jets have been able to do. And again, if you look at the left side, you've got Dylan Samberg, who's probably going to be able to make the jump this year. Declan Chisholm, as he said, not necessarily next year, but probably the year after. Excellent skater, just phenomenal skating, just has some things to work on in his game, but his skating is NHL rate, no question. And I just think that you have a lot on the left side in which to draw up from. You don't even have Tucker Pullman signed right now. So your right side defenseman right now on the Winnipeg Jets, if you ignore Dylan DeMello, is Neil Pionk. That's it. That's all you have right now, and you have.
Dave. You're gonna have to address that via trade or free agency. That's why if Dylan DeMello is ultimately selected by Seattle, you have to think that the Jets are going to be after someone like David Savard, right?
Well,
on the right side. That's the only option. If you don't have DeMello, you're going to have $3 million of cap space extra, and they already have. However, what do they have? 15 million or 20 million, whatever they have now. Obviously, Andrew Kopp, Neil Pionk, Logan Stanley have to be signed. But that's the way I look at it, guys. Like, if you end up losing Dylan DeMello, you have to be aggressive in bringing in a top 4 right shot defenseman.
But look, you can be as aggressive as you want. That still requires two to tango. There still has to be somebody who wants to take the Winnipeg Jets money.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely, yeah.
Dylan DeMello took the Jets money. Dylan DeMello fits seamlessly into the Jets' plans right now. If you slot out your defensive group, Neil Pionk is going to be the highest paid guy on your right side, no question. Dylan DeMello at $3 million for the next 3 years is it's a very reasonable cap hit. He slots seamlessly next to Josh Morrissey in the top 4 of your defense. Yep. I mean, to Drew, give up on DeMello.
I in previous shows said I would protect DeMello.
I know.
I'm on Team DeMello, which doesn't mean, by the way, for everybody watching and listening, doesn't mean that any of us are, saying that Logan Stanley is a bad defenseman. Stanley had a great rookie season with the Jets, and we hope that the Jets are able to keep both Stanley and DeMello. But just in terms of, putting your GM hat on, boys, I would take DeMello because the Jets are a win now team. The Jets want to go far in the playoffs. They want to compete for a Stanley Cup. Dylan DeMello at 27, 28 years old, is a bona fide top 4 right shot defenseman in the NHL. And yes, Logan Stanley might be able to move up into your top 4, but most likely he's going to be a third pairing defenseman next year on the left side. So, and he's unsigned. So I think you have to factor that in, Drew, right? Like
he's an RFA.
Right. So, I mean, we expect a shorter term deal. I don't think anybody's expecting, Stanley to sign an 8-year deal or anything like that, but it always could happen. But the Jets will have to move a prospect or draft picks in order to keep both Stanley and DeMello. That's pretty obvious because I agree, with Drew. I think, Seattle, $3 million a year for the next 3 years. I think DeMello is going to be very attractive to Ron Francis.
Well, I find the revisionist history to be a little bit amusing, and maybe it's not exactly revisionist history, but everyone's saying, well, if the Jets hadn't made the move with Vegas, they would have been able to draft Nick Suzuki. Well, I mean, that's a little bit, that's a bridge too far for me.
Maybe the Jets didn't draft Nick Suzuki. They probably would have.
Maybe the Jets, exactly. Nobody knows if the Jets were going to draft Nick Suzuki had they not made that move with Vegas. And, at the time, nobody was complaining about that move. Everyone said, okay, so a first round swap and a third round pick and to keep everybody intact. That was a pretty good price to pay. Nobody had a problem with that at that point in time. It's only after this past sort of playoff run where Nick Suzuki was so important and so valuable for the Montreal Canadiens that a lot of people were becoming apoplectic about it. I mean,
hold on. I mean, Suzuki led the OHL. I mean, Suzuki is a hot. Some people thought Suzuki should have been a top 10 pick, but yes, sure. I agree. I mean, the Nick Suzuki could have been a Winnipeg Jet narrative is something that just started this year. You're right, Drew. And the reality is, I always find it funny when, people say the trade ultimately turned out to be, and then they name who was drafted by that team. It's like, well, at the time, you're trading a first round pick not knowing who that player is going to be. It could easily be a player that doesn't have a long NHL career. So anyways, just wanted to get that in there. Suzuki's a really good player.
Suzuki's a great player, but it just as easily could have been that Christian Vesalainen turned into be a great player. It's not like you traded a first round.
He's a good player too, though. He just hasn't had enough of an opportunity at the NHL level. Let's wait and see. He's only 22 years old, right?
Exactly right. So I mean, if Seattle said to the Jets, it's going to cost you a first round swap and a third round pick, and we won't really take anybody of significance off your roster, I would not be opposed to that. The Jets making that kind of move. I would be opposed to the Jets exposing Dylan DeMello and leaving him for Seattle to take him. Seattle's going to gladly take a top 4 defenseman because I know that people look at the numbers and they look at the offensive numbers and they say, oh, God, he can't be any good. He's got no offensive numbers. Well, first of all, it's not like Logan Stanley's got dynamic offensive numbers himself. He had some nice moments and he showed some flashes, and that's great. But Dylan DeMello, in terms of a quality shutdown defenseman who can make a good first pass and get the puck out of your own zone, those don't grow on trees.
It's apples and oranges. Speaking of trees, it's not a straight up comparison. You're comparing guys that are 5 years apart. Not only do they play different sides, but you just can't compare the two. I mean, look, going back to what we said before, and Dave can get in here because you and I have been talking too much, Drew. But yes. You have to leave one of these defensemen unprotected, and I'm sure this has been a tough decision for Chevy and Craig Heisinger and the entire Jets organization. But again, all I'm going to say is I sound like a broken record here, boys. But I'm just saying I don't think it's a foregone conclusion that Seattle takes DeMello. I think there's a good chance that they will take DeMello if he's exposed, and we expect him to be the one who's exposed. But I'm just saying there always is the chance that there's a deal swung that sees Seattle take another player, which could ultimately be Mason Appleton.
Dave?
I mean, guys, as he used the broken record analogy, and I think that it's we've been saying it for a while. I mean, people are casual about the idea of Dylan DeMello and saying that he's easily replaceable. If he is, then sure. But I mean, I just think it's funny. I was texting with someone and I said I couldn't imagine that we'd ever be in a world that Logan Stanley would be driving folks crazy, and that's a good thing. Obviously, it's very good that Logan Stanley has put himself into the conversation. I just think people need to realize what the Jets have on the right side, and that there isn't a number of guys who are going to jump into the role. But like I said, if the Jets were able to get if you can get a David Savard to commit to Winnipeg, David Savard's maybe going to give you a little more size on that back end, maybe. But you'd think almost like you'd have a lot of, second pairing guys, right? You'd have DeMello, Pionk, and Savard. Well, that's a pretty good right side, at least for the Winnipeg Jets, comparing what they've had in the past. And I just think there's lots of guys that people think, oh, well, you'll get him and he'll replace this player. But I don't know that you're going to be just replacing guys like this. So I just think people have to realize it's not that easy. And if it was, with the Jets, I guess I go back to what we looked at last year. What did we look at last year? All summer. What was the question all summer? It was, how are the Jets going to fix the defense? Mm-hmm. So if it was this easy, guys,
they would have done it last summer.
Think about it. No, but think about it. If it was this easy, and it's easy. You'll just do this. You'll acquire this guy in a trade. Guys, has Kevin Cheveldayoff shown any desire to trade away his prospects? There are no forward prospects other than Cole Perfetti, maybe Nathan Smith, who's still playing in college. Those are your forward prospects for the Jets, which is why the Jets have to restock that with forwards in the draft. You've got lots of left side defensive prospects. You've got two right side in Leon Gavanke and Johnny Kovacevic. But it's not that simple because people love to pretend like it is. But again, this was the exact same question last summer, didn't get addressed. It was the same question all year long. The Jets got Jordy Ben. Let's just process that. When the Jets needed to improve their defense, they got Jordy Ben, who at best was a 7, right? So if it's so easy to do, like everybody's pretending like it is, then why didn't the Jets do it? It's because it's not easy to do. So when you have a guy like Dylan DeMello, and people can dump on him all they want, but his numbers are his numbers. His numbers
Dave, sorry, Dave, I was just going to say, the price tag is going to be high. I think I was texting you, Dave, about that trade, unless I was texting in my sleep. But that Nick Leddy trade, at first I was like, okay, Nick Leddy's got 1 year left on his deal. They had to give up a second-round pick, but Detroit already had 3 second-round picks and 2 first-round picks. But if you think about it, that really helps the Islanders. Because what was Leddy making? I think he was making around $4.5 million, $5 million. I'd have to look it up. But now the Islanders have some more money to either bring in a forward or bring in a defenseman. Like you hear Lou Lamoriello might want to bring in Ryan Suter. Right. And we don't know if Suter's going to go to Long Island because, there's going to be other teams.
$5.5 million.
$5.5 million. So that's the price tag, right? Like if the Jets want to bring in a veteran left side defenseman, you're going to have to give up probably a second round pick and a player, right?
Yeah, it's going to be a significant price tag.
Was that an episode of Cribs with Sean Reynolds?
Yeah, he was walking around. He was walking around his place.
Let's take a quick break. Shawnee's going to get settled in. Rennie himself is going to join us. Much more expansion draft talk, much more Jets talk to come. You're listening, you're watching, you're chatting with the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. We're live on our YouTube channel and all of our social media platforms.
Keeping Winnipeg laughing for over 30 years. Rumors, Canada's longest-running comedy club, bringing you the biggest laughs from the best comedians on the planet. Jerry Seinfeld, Chris Rock, Jon Stewart, Dennis Miller, Brad Garrett, the greats, and all the up-and-comers too. When was the last time you laughed out loud? Make it a great night out with friends, or book your office or birthday party. Even a fundraising event at Rumors. Get all the details and dates on upcoming shows at rumorscomedyclub.com.
Hey, Drew.
Ezzy, whoa, what a smile!
Yeah, I got my crowns done at Linden Market Dental Center, and they whiten my teeth.
I see.
They're so bright that every time I smile, they go...
We have hockey tonight. Do you have a mouth guard to protect those pearly whites?
I sure do.
Whoa, they even ting through the mouth guard.
Linden Market Dental Center covers all your dental needs from restorative to cosmetic dentistry and will fit you with a sports guard for that active lifestyle. 877 Waverly. See lindenmarketdental.com.
Hi, it's Drew from Illegal Curve here. Selling your home can be stressful, but it wasn't for me. Thanks to my friends at Zappia Group Realty, they made the process so easy. My home sold within 48 hours and with multiple offers. Zappia Group Realty took care of everything with their exquisite customer service and attention to detail. If you want to sell your home for more in less time, get started by talking to Frank and Mauro Zappia of Zappia Group Realty. Online at zappiagroup.com.
While you can't always count on your team winning, nor your favorite player scoring, one thing you can always count on is Bernstein's Deli. They've expanded their services because the team at Bernstein's Deli wants to accommodate your needs and keep you safe. Open Tuesday to Saturday from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. to serve you. Head to your phone, in-store or online to shop for groceries or order meals from the restaurant, like the legendary Illegal Curve sandwich. Just go to bernsteinsdeli.com.
So you're a pizza person, you married a wing person, but somehow your kids are salad people. You can't pick your fam, but you can pick your BP meal deal, starting from $18.99 for takeout or delivery at bostonpizza.com.
Let's go. Get everybody out.
Welcome back to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Saturday morning, we're live on our YouTube channel and all of our social media platforms. Dave changed into a Jays hat, as he's wearing a Jays hat, and Rennie over there himself is repping the Boston Red Sox. I'm not sure what's up with that, but good morning, Sean. How are you, brother?
I'm doing great, guys. How are you doing?
We're doing great, thank you. Nice to see you. I enjoyed the sort of tour of your property as you were backstage walking around there. I sort of half expected to see Mr. Manitoba Golf Tour himself, Kenny Weeb, walking behind you there in the grassy knoll that you have going on.
We do spend some time apart, yeah. But I was sorry, I didn't mean to take you on a tour. I'm trying to find a spot where the Wi-Fi is working. I think I got one here.
You're clear and you sound good, so all good. Mr. Reynolds, obviously the talk of the town is the upcoming expansion draft, and we had a spirited debate about the DeMello versus Stanley conversation, as so many people have. The Jets themselves published an article on their website written by our good friend Paul Edmonds yesterday, where he, if you can read between the lines of what he's saying, it sounds like it's going to be Logan Stanley as the third defenseman protected. If you were Jets GM Kevin Cheveldayoff, are you protecting Logan Stanley or are you protecting Dylan DeMello?
For me, it would be Dylan DeMello, and it would be DeMello for a number of reasons. But I think the main one is that, to me, you can't always be that team of the future. You can be at times if you want to load up. If you're the Ottawa Senators, it can be your strategy to load up and start sending, guys who can help now out the door for guys who can help in the future, and that works at certain times. But I mean, look, if you're a Jets fan, if you're this organization, 2018 was supposed to be the beginning of something, and it hasn't been. It hasn't turned out that way. And I get that Logan Stanley, I'm very impressed with what I saw from him. I'm very excited by what he was able to do in the playoffs. That last taste that he gave us right in Game 4 against the Montreal Canadiens, that was, impressive. But I think that if you take Dylan DeMello out of that group and insert or leave Logan Stanley for this year and didn't do anything else, that is more harmful to the defense core, taking out Dylan DeMello in this time right now. I'm not talking about the future, in this time right now, than taking out Logan Stanley. I think that's problematic when you're trying to sell an organization that has the potential in the next 3 years to be the last 3 years for Connor Hellebuyck and Mark Scheifele. It can't always be about tomorrow. At some point, it's got to be about today. And we know that the biggest issue the Winnipeg Jets have is on the back end. And if you're taking significant pieces away and trying to fix that through unrestricted free agency, which this team really hasn't been able to do in the past, I think you're just creating another hole in a spot you can't have a hole, and that's a problem.
I agree with you 100%, Sean. And let's go under the assumption that Seattle takes Dylan DeMello. And as you mentioned, I mean, the Jets, Winnipeg is not a hot spot for free agents. Obviously, the Jets have been able to sign, the odd free agent, like a guy like Derek Forbort. He actually really worked out on a one-year deal, but we just don't know if Forbort's going to be back. The expectation is the Jets are going to sign another left shot defenseman. And so what are the chances, in your opinion, that the Jets are going to acquire a right shot defenseman via trade? Like, we know the roster freeze is coming up shortly here, right? Like, it's in, 3 hours or 4 hours? Like, we've seen Nick Leddy traded to Detroit. We've seen Duncan Keith traded, to Edmonton. We've seen some veteran defensemen traded. What's the likelihood the Jets either do that prior to today's trade deadline or, after the trade deadline leading up to the start of free agency on July 28th?
Well, I mean, I think a trade is how it has to happen for them. Again, we've seen time, every time people get excited for unrestricted free agency, and, on Sportsnet and on TSN, we always do a big show every year, right? So I'm right at the center of, this is what Winnipeg's looking for. This is what they could use. This is what they need. And the show ends the same in Winnipeg almost every year. Like the fact that the biggest unrestricted free agent acquisitions that we've ever had in Winnipeg before are Steve Mason and Dmitry Kulikov over the course of 10 years tells you how that story ends up. Now, maybe this year is a little bit different because, because of COVID and the salary cap crunch. Maybe there's a situation by which the Jets can weaponize their cap space in a way that they haven't in years past. Maybe there's players who are going to be able to get money in Winnipeg that they couldn't get elsewhere. But, even when we started thinking that, you start looking around the league and seeing all the teams that now have cap space and can weaponize that cap space, there's still going to be a significant competition for the services of those other players. Guys, we're from Winnipeg. We love Winnipeg. We get it. A lot of people from outside Winnipeg don't get it. And that's what they're dealing with when you're trying to bring free agents to Winnipeg. So I don't think you can count on that route. I would suggest that the trades that we would potentially expect, if they do come, are going to come after unrestricted free agency, because I think the Jets will take a swing and see what they can go pick up there. But, if they swing and miss, which is typically the case of what happens in Winnipeg, I think they go and do that afterwards. I would expect them to do it, but the guys, I expected them to do it last year. I didn't expect them to go with the defense that they had last year into the season. I would have thought that they would have moved something significant to try and bring in something significant. I don't think they can stand pat this year, but I didn't think they could last year either. And I don't, again, I always say this, when it's all said and done and Kevin Cheveldayoff retires, I would love it if he wrote a book, because it would be really interesting to see all the deals that he has made over the past years that have died on the table because the players involved weren't interested in coming. Maybe he had something really interesting worked out with another GM, but the player would not come here if they had that level of control. And that's what you're dealing with small market teams. That's what you're dealing with. Edmonton goes through the same thing. I would argue that Minnesota probably goes through the same thing. A lot of teams have to deal with this issue. We're not Tampa Bay. We're not Vegas. You're not Dallas. You don't have the tax-free state advantage. So, the Jets have to do something if they want to contend. And bring this team to its full potential. But that doesn't mean that something's going to happen, because I think last year is a perfect example of seeing that nothing did happen. And I think we expected going into the trade deadline last year something to happen. It didn't happen there. It's not as easy as we would like it to be.
Who's going to tell Drew that he's on mute?
I was about to do it.
I was like, my bad. I thought something was wrong. I'm like, oh God, my whole thing's glitching. I can't hear Drew. What's going on?
My bad. I apologize. I was going to say that, Sean, you're making a powerful enemy out of both Olli Jokinen and Alexei Ponikarovsky, and not including them in your significant free agent list. But
Sean, let me tell you, that silence was absolute music to my ears. Drew has never sounded better. It was like birds chirping.
Okay, I'm going to stop talking now. Sean Reynolds is our guest. You're listening, you're watching, you're chatting with the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Dave Minuk will take it over from this point on.
Sean, I think a big question mark, other than his status as an RFA, is what happens with Andrew Kopp. So how do you see that playing out? Because that really does kind of potentially throw a wrinkle in the Jets' plans based on how his contract status works and what they're going to do in their plans with him for the long term, don't you think?
Oh, I couldn't agree more. I mean, one of the things I think the Jets have shown over the years, and just getting back to the point of what we're talking about, trying to get guys here, some of the best ways to get guys here is to keep guys here, right? And what we have seen, in the case of a guy like Adam Lowry, who I think left over $1 million a year on the table to stay in Winnipeg, right, is that when you get guys into the organization, you can show them your vision and what you believe in. They've been able to sell guys on that, on staying in Winnipeg long-term. Blake Wheeler re-upped and stayed long-term. A lot of the restricted free agents have given away years beyond when they would have to stay here. Mark Scheifele is a perfect example. Kyle Connor's another one. Those guys, that's how you get guys to stay in Winnipeg, and so I think the way that Kevin Cheveldayoff has to look at these things is guys like Andrew Kopp are almost more important and more valuable to the organization than guys on the outside, because they've been here, they believe in the team, in the process, in the organization. And so those guys end up being worth their weight in gold. Now, Kevin Cheveldayoff blows me away, the numbers that he's been able to get guys locked down for. And I mean, I guess there's a couple of ways of looking at it. You got to keep doing that, because as soon as you don't, like, you go out and you save a whole bunch of money on Adam Lowry, and then if you give it away on Andrew Kopp, then the next guy in that situation is going to come in and be like, well, you paid Andrew Kopp, so now I want to get paid, right? So that's one of the things you have to deal with. Being able to weaponize cap space comes with signing good deals, and Kevin Cheveldayoff's been able to do that to put himself in a good position. But the other part of it is, you got to start paying the guys who've been good soldiers and stuck around. A guy like Andrew Kopp has made less money than he's worth for a really long time, and it looks like he's intent on getting out and getting paid exactly what he's worth, if not more, because he has, not been paid what he's worth for a really long time. And I mean, it's another reason why I think Dylan DeMello may get signed by the organization. Dylan DeMello is one of the very rare guys who is heading to unrestricted free agency and decided to re-up for a good number in Winnipeg. Here's a guy who could have listened to what the rest of the league had to say, and he didn't. And so I wonder, in that situation, if the Jets don't feel pressured to keep him because he was a good soldier. And so you want to show guys the decision that Dylan DeMello made, that there's, you think about that when you make these kind of decisions. But back to Andrew Kopp, I mean, I think I know that people were wondering if there was going to be a deal made before the roster freeze today. I don't think that's going to happen. I think he's kind of too valuable to rush that decision. But I mean, in the end, what the Jets are going to do, to me, it's a toss-up. I think they're going to keep him. I think they're going to pay him. I think it's going to be a number that he's really comfortable with. And I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it's a good decision to pull off if you're the Winnipeg Jets, because you want to send a message around the rest of the league that when guys do good for you, you do good by them. You don't want to be seen as one of these teams that use up players' restricted free agent years, hold their number down, and then when it's time to pay them, say, well, if you want to get paid, you got to go somewhere else. I don't think it's a good message to send.
Sean Reynolds, our guest on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show Saturday morning. We're live on YouTube. We're live on all of our social media platforms. Sean, to your point about Andrew Kopp, then, I mean, he is he's arbitration eligible. He can only be player elected arbitration, which means he's got a 1-year contract if he goes that route, which walks him right into unrestricted free agency. So if the long-term deal or a trade isn't made before today's roster freeze, isn't that sort of mean that it's got either a long-term deal or a trade has to be made before the arbitration process begins? Because once that arbitration award is handed down, which will be probably in his favor given the season he had last year, on pace for, I believe, 56 points had it been an 82-game season, he's got a lot of leverage now, but he's got even more leverage once it goes to arbitration, if it goes that far.
I mean, it doesn't have to, but you're right. It probably has to be done before that date. I mean, look, Andrew Kopp, we know, was very upset with the arbitration process last year, came into camp with a burr in his saddle about it and took that and used it to be, to become, the best version of himself, and probably started putting up numbers that I don't think any of us were expecting from Andrew Kopp. Again, that's something that I think should be rewarded if you're the Winnipeg Jets. I mean, potentially, I guess what they could do is they could, if he went to arbitration and came into camp again with a burr in his saddle, does putting him in that spot 2 years in a row mean he's out the door? It probably does, Drew. You're entirely right. I think it probably does. But at the same time, if you bring him in, show him he's a valued member of the team, that just like they did this year, Paul Maurice put him in a lot of really good spots and places to succeed. And then maybe you just use the year again as another way of showing him just what he can be in this market, because that's the one thing is a lot of players leave and go to a different market and they don't necessarily turn into, or get the opportunities that they were having in this market. I always wonder about Joel Armia when he went to Montreal. Like, did he get better opportunities there? He probably did. But in the end, what we've seen from Joel Armia is a player who is playing on the Montreal Canadiens' fourth line. Was that his cap if he stayed here in Winnipeg? These are the kind of questions players have to ask themselves. So if you're the Jets, I think that, if it does go to arbitration and it's not working out, and you end up with him for another year, do you give him that year and just show him how valuable he is to the franchise, and then in the background try and have cooler heads prevail and keep saying, we still want this guy. I know this hasn't worked out this way, but we want to get him locked down to a number. And in the meantime, we're showing you how much we value him by giving him opportunity on the ice. It's a dangerous game to play. I think you're entirely right, Drew. I don't think it's like kind of gun to the head, make a decision right now kind of territory, though, with Andrew Copp, just because of the long history that he's got with this team, with the players around that he clearly cares about, and an organization that he said time and time again that he believes in what they're doing here.
Sean, just getting away from the Jets for a second here, like, what have you made of the moves that have been made in the Central Division? I think, like, a lot of people are forgetting that the Jets are going back to the Central Division. The All-Canadian Division was just a one-year thing, but, like, obviously the big moves were, the Wild buying out Zach Parise and Ryan Suter. Parise, I expected. Suter, I think you probably would agree that not everybody saw that coming, but obviously, Duncan Keith being traded to the Edmonton Oilers in exchange for, Caleb Jones and the draft pick. Like, what do you make of those moves? Because I think what you're seeing is, like, a lot of teams in the Central just getting rid of some of those, older, bigger contracts. There was a lot of money left, on the Suter and Parise deals.
Yeah, I mean, you got to wonder behind the scenes how much of it is positioning, especially when it comes to the Central Division. Like, you're taking a look at Colorado moving Ryan Graves, and you're thinking, boy, oh boy.
Yeah, I forgot about that one. Sorry, that was the one I was forgetting about as well. Yeah.
Yeah, like you're thinking, boy, you'd think the Jets would have loved to have been in on a player like that. And it was kind of my first thought. I think a lot of times it's our first thought when we cover the Jets, and you're thinking every time a player goes, you're thinking that player could have been used here, right? And then you remember it's in the division, and you highly doubt that Colorado is moving a guy like that, or would take far more or demand far more if they were moving him into the division. But what I see is, I mean, Minnesota clearly has a lot of belief in their rookie of the year, and I think that they're trying to make a play. You hear their names popping in on guys like Eichel, and so this is a team that Bill Guerin is going to put his thumbprint on. So he's clearing as much space as he can to take a run. So if you're the Jets, you got to know that that's happening, right? If you're a team like Chicago, I wonder how much of that. Clearly, to me, it looks like they're trying to make room for Seth Jones and get Seth Jones there. And Chicago is a team that I think if they can figure out things defensively, much like the Jets, could turn into a really, really dangerous team if they can figure that out. Colorado stays dangerous to me. That's a smart move to, make sure that they don't lose a guy for nothing. But in the case of Chicago, I think it's really interesting because I wonder how many of these teams out there are clearing the deck to create cap space so that they can compete with, or at least try and throw their hat into the ring to keep players away from teams like the Winnipeg Jets. Like, the Winnipeg Jets are dangerous. If they were just any other team and could use their cap space to go out and get, a top flight defenseman and a shutdown defenseman, both on the right side, then all of a sudden everything changes for this team, right? So you got to wonder how much, and we've seen teams do it in the past. Vegas did it against them. They play to keep players away from them in 2018 at the trade deadline. It worked out for the Jets because they got Stastny anyways. But we do know that teams act like this. They play defense. They position themselves in the market to try and not only bring in players, but keep players away from teams that they think are a danger. And so I take a look at Chicago making those moves, and I think here's a team that's clearing cap space to make themselves either able to run and get a guy like Seth Jones, or be in on a lot of these names and potentially, direct the attention away from a team like the Winnipeg Jets. So I mean, I think, and maybe it's just my time in Montreal, I take a look at the Atlantic Division. That's the division now that I look at and think like, boy, that's the group of death. But a couple tweaks here and there, and the Central Division becomes that division that's really, really hard to make the playoffs in. If teams like Chicago can make overtures, and if Minnesota can build on what they did next year. I don't know about you guys, but I've been watching them in this whole past season and been wondering, boy, when the Jets return to the Central Division, how tough an out is that Minnesota team going to be? What are the Jets walking into here when they walk back into the Central Division?
So, Sean, that walks me back to the Winnipeg Jets, and getting back to that topic at hand that most people are focused on here in Winnipeg and Manitoba is, how do you see the young guys being used next year? The guys like David Gustafsson, Christian Vesalainen, because it's enough with them sitting on the sidelines. They're too good to be playing for the Manitoba Moose at this point in their young careers, and they need that opportunity. But it doesn't seem to be given yet, or hasn't yet necessarily been earned under this coaching staff. So how is it that they're going to allow guys to take that next step, give them that shot? Do you see that happening, I should say, this year with guys like Gustafsson, perhaps Perfetti, because of his situation of either NHL or OHL, and a guy like Christian Vesalainen?
Yeah, I mean, it all depends on what they're able to elicit in unrestricted free agency. That to me, that's what it comes down to. I mean, I'm interested. I think you can't wait any longer on a guy like David Gustafsson. He's got to come up. But if he's coming up, I don't know that I see him going anywhere other than that fourth line, right? Mm-hmm. And so if you're going and putting him in that spot, maybe you're electing to go in that direction where you're willing to go young with your fourth line. It's kind of a clash of ideals, because clearly last year I thought Paul Maurice showed his hand in very much wanting to, have an established veteran presence on the bench that he thought would be helpful to that team, and it really did look like that way throughout a good chunk of the year. I mean, that fourth line did everything that he was asking them to do, and that, pulled off exactly what he was trying to get them to do. But at some point, you got to start playing the young guys, right? Does he see that as a risk now this year? If you bring up David Gustafsson and for the first time give him, that first season of handing him that fourth line role, and do you put Christian Vesalainen alongside him? I love the idea of Cole Perfetti coming up and playing on that second line, giving him a chance. But I mean, if we're getting into the stage where you're bringing up Cole Perfetti to play a significant role on the second line, David Gustafsson, you're putting him on the fourth line, Christian Vesalainen, maybe you're putting him, beside him on the fourth line. And then you're in the position where you're bringing up, maybe Ville Heinola. If you make the decision to keep Logan Stanley, does he stay in the lineup? Does Samberg get a shot? If you're getting into that territory, you're coming in with a really, really young lineup. And I know people love to hold up specific examples. And one of these reasons, these examples don't work for me, because it's always the best of the best, right? It's always, Cale Makar was really good, so bring up Ville Heinola, right? It's not apples and apples. You're talking about one of the greatest young prospects to come up in Cale Makar, and he came up at an older age than what we're seeing from these younger guys, right? And it's always, you can take a look at Cole Caulfield and say, Cole Caulfield did it well. Cole Perfetti should be able to do the exact same thing. Maybe he can. That's the answer, is always maybe he can, but it shouldn't be expected that because Cole Caulfield succeeded, someone like Cole Perfetti is going to walk in and succeed again, right? So if you get into that situation where you're bringing in all these young guys all in one shot, to me, you have to expect massive growing pains, and those growing pains usually rear their ugly head during the playoffs. And you're putting yourself in a situation where maybe you take a run at it, maybe you try it, but you have to be okay with the fact that things could end poorly that season because of the rookie element in your lineup. So it becomes tricky to see. I think the answer is more likely along the lines, if they could go out and pick up some guys on the back end. They'd like to bring in Heinola, but probably Heinola. I don't think Sandberg yet, right? And they'd probably like to have enough depth that they could take Logan Stanley and put him in and out of the lineup, if he's not taken, in the expansion draft. I think David Gustafson's at the stage where it's like, give that guy a roster spot and be done with it, right? Maybe Cole Perfetti is a guy that you leave and then bring up later in the year, so that if you're going to the playoffs, he's a guy that you can try and recreate the magic that Cole Caulfield did. Bring him in at that time, and then if it doesn't work out, have enough depth that you can either bring him in or out of the lineup based on that. I think that, everyone's excited, as they should be, about a lot of these young prospects, but bringing them all in one shot, it's a dangerous game to play, and it's a game that if you are going to play that, you have to be ready for the consequences of what happens if it doesn't work out. So I still think there's a lot of veteran depth that they're going to be looking for. But yeah, the time is now with some of these guys. Gustafson is one that stands out to me. Like, he's got to be brought up. He's got to be given a roster spot. You got to let him move on with his career at this stage.
Sean Reynolds covers the Winnipeg Jets for Sportsnet. You can see all of his fine work on that fine network, and of course with Kenny and Rennie on their very own YouTube channel as well.
I might see Shawnee later today. We're both in LDB here. I think we're about 20 minutes apart. So right. if you want to go for a little sea-doo on the Bird River, Sean, I'm game.
Yeah, Sean, sure. If Ezzy's east of you, we recommend driving west.
Hey, Ezzy, if you make it into the the Lee River system, my father-in-law's got a big giant retaining wall with a massive Jet symbol painted on it. You can't miss it.
Amazing.
So, look for that.
I'll come by. Look for the heavy bearded guy in a kayak.
right
in a kayak. Guys. You're going to kayak?
Absolutely not. Kayak, though, Drew, I don't know if you know this. Kayak is spelt the same backwards.
Yes. Do you know what that's called, Ezzy?
I think palindrome or
very good, Mr. Ginsburg. Well done. You've passed your language test for the day. Sean, I gotta say, I love your t-shirt. Great color on you. Really strong fashion sense today that you're sporting. I think that's great.
Right on, guys. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, buddy.
Thanks.
See you later. There he goes, Sean Reynolds, our good friend from Sportsnet, departing us here on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Let's take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk more about Andrew Kopp. Craig Button is going to join us in about 15-20 minutes time to talk more about the expansion draft and more about next Friday's first round of the NHL draft. Much more to come. Hour number 2 up next. You're listening, you're watching, you're chatting with the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. We're live on YouTube and all of our social media platforms.
Keeping Winnipeg laughing for over 30 years. Rumors, Canada's longest running comedy club, bringing you the biggest laughs from the best comedians on the planet. Jerry Seinfeld, Chris Rock, Jon Stewart, Dennis Miller, Brad Garrett, the greats, and all the up-and-comers too. When was the last time you laughed out loud? Make it a great night out with friends or book your office or birthday party. Even a fundraising event at Rumors. Get all the details and dates on upcoming shows at rumorscomedyclub.com.
Hey, Drew.
Ezzy, whoa, what a smile!
Yeah, I got my crowns done at Linden Market Dental Center, and they whiten my teeth.
I see.
They're so bright that every time I smile, they go,
"We have hockey tonight. Do you have a mouth guard to protect those pearly whites?"
I sure do.
Whoa, they even ting through the mouth guard.
Linden Market Dental Center covers all your dental needs, from restorative to cosmetic dentistry, and will fit you with a sports guard for that active lifestyle. 877 Waverly. See lindenmarketdental.com.
Hi, it's Drew from Illegal Curve here. Selling your home can be stressful, but it wasn't for me. Thanks to my friends at Zappia Group Realty, they made the process so easy. My home sold within 48 hours and with multiple offers. Zappia Group Realty took care of everything with their exquisite customer service and attention to detail. If you want to sell your home for more in less time, get started by talking to Frank and Mauro Zappia of Zappia Group Realty. Online at zappiagroup.com.
While you can't always count on your team winning, nor your favorite player scoring, one thing you can always count on is Bernstein's Deli. They've expanded their services because the team at Bernstein's Deli wants to accommodate your needs and keep you safe. Open Tuesday to Saturday from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. to serve you. Head to your phone, in-store or online to shop for groceries or order meals from the restaurant, like the legendary Illegal Curve sandwich. Just go to bernsteinsdeli.com.
So you're a pizza person, you married a wing person, but somehow your kids are salad people. You can't pick your fam, but you can pick your BP meal deal, starting from $18.99 for takeout or delivery at bostonpizza.com.
Hour number 2 of the Illegal Curve Hockey Show starts now. We're live on YouTube. We're live on all of our social media platforms. Ezra Ginsburg in the middle, and the bottom of the screen, Dave Minuk in the right, now wearing a Notre Dame Fighting Irish hat. Is that the way the show's gonna be, Dave? Every time we go to break, a new hat?
Yeah, why not? I switched to the Blue Jays because I saw Sean was wearing Red Sox, so I felt an obligation.
Fair enough. I can see the Illegal Curve hat in the corner there, but you won't wear that one because you don't like the flat brim.
Nope, Dave Hammond doesn't wear 5950s.
There you go. Okay.
By the end of the show, Drew, Dave's going to be wearing a top hat.
Hey, that would be great. If Dave has a top hat handy, I want to see him sporting that top hat and like one of those tuxedo T-shirts. Not a real tuxedo, just like, you know.
I was actually just as a quick segue. I was talking about Ezzy's famous tuxedo shirt that I went with him to buy in Grand Park Mall when he did the Ezzies in the second year, I believe, of the Ezzies, and he wore a tuxedo T-shirt. I was telling the story. It was
a little tight, if I remember correctly.
It was a smidge tight. I can send out the picture.
Yeah, should have gone with the XL.
Nobody wants to see that picture, I can assure you that. In any event, let's talk about Andrew Kopp. A little piece of interesting news. Darren Dreger reporting that the Columbus Blue Jackets are unlikely to protect Max Domi, former first-round pick, son of Ty, of course, born in Winnipeg, as it happens, when Ty, I think, played for the Jets back in the day. Max Domi, who was traded from the Habs to the Blue Jackets in the Josh Anderson deal, didn't work out, and now Max Domi expected to be unprotected, and Dreger reporting that it's likely that the Kraken are going to take Max Domi from the Columbus Blue Jackets.
Well, and why that's, sorry, I was just going to say, Drew, I mean, the first thing that, jumps out to me is, well, who is Columbus going after? Because if you look at the depth chart, I mean, who's second and third on the depth chart up the middle? It's Jack Roslovic and it's Boone Jenner.
Yeah.
Right, like those are your top two centers if you lose Max Domi, and Max Domi's played a lot of wing as well. So I mean the Blue Jackets are very thin up the middle, and yeah, you're going to start to hear names like Jack Eichel. I don't know if Columbus is Jack Eichel's number one choice. I think he'd much rather go play in a city like LA. But that's a big loss. Obviously, Columbus, we could say, with a lot of confidence that they lost the Josh Anderson for Max Domi trade.
That's very true. Max Domi fell out of favor with John Tortorella pretty quickly. I'm a little surprised the Blue Jackets are going to give up on him that quickly. But anyways, just interesting to see some of the names that are going to be trickling out over the course of the next, the rest of the day. Certainly, the rosters are due. The protected lists are due later on this afternoon. If I recall correctly, I think I said 4 p.m. Central Time is when the rosters are due, and the roster freeze happens as of 2 p.m. Central Time. So if the Jets were going to be making a deal for involving a guy like Andrew Kopp to maybe protect a Mason Appleton, that has to happen within the next 4 hours between now and 2 p.m. Central Time. The Andrew Kopp story is just absolutely fascinating to me. This is a guy who's 1 year away. It's a guy who has bet big on himself and succeeded last year. If he played an 82-game season, he was on pace for, as I said, I think 56 points. If you're the Jets, is your desire to sign Andrew Kopp long-term, even if it costs you $4.5 or $5 million? Or are you at this point in time looking to trade Andrew Kopp, protect Mason Appleton if it comes to that in the next 4 hours, and maybe restock some of the cupboard, especially with young forward prospects? Which way do you think the Jets are planning on playing this out?
Yeah, I don't know how many tie-end, forward prospects you're going to get in a trade for Andrew Kopp. I think you might get a pretty good forward prospect, but I think, your expectations shouldn't be, too high. But I don't think the Jets are necessarily actively trying to trade Andrew Kopp, and just because I said that, he's probably going to be traded in the next few hours. And to be honest with you, Columbus makes a lot of sense considering, you know, the connections between, you know, Jack Roslovic and Andrew Kopp specifically, right? And Pascal Vincent. So I mean, there's always the chance, you know, that he is traded to Columbus. We know the Jets and Blue Jackets have made some trades as of late, but I think, as you said, Drew, it's going to all come down to numbers. Like, I think $5 million a year is a little bit high for Andrew Kopp, but you might say $4 million a year is too low, right? So like, are they able to, you know, come to a deal that's, you know, closer to 4 million? And how many years? I imagine Andrew Kopp's looking for a 4 or 5, maybe even a 6-year deal. And I think Sean Reynolds made a good point last segment. Like, you know, Kopp has been underpaid considering his value, you know, to this team, a guy that, you know, most likely is a third line guy, but he's a guy that's played on the second line. He's played on the first line. He can play center. He can play on the power play. He's a penalty kill. I know Dave loves this, you know, term, but he is really the Swiss Army knife for the Jets, right? Like, it used to be Michael Frolik. Matty Perreault is another one of those players that you could call a Swiss Army knife. So, I mean, if I'm, you know, Kevin Cheveldayoff, I absolutely want to sign Andrew Kopp long-term. But when you consider that, you know, Neil Pionk deserves a hefty raise, right? Like, Neil Pionk's going to probably be around 5 million, right, Drew? You think he might even be closer to 6? I don't necessarily know if that's the case, but
I think he gets more than Morrissey makes right now. Morrissey's making 6.25. I think Pionk is above 6.25 if he signs a long-term deal. It
could happen, but I'll say this, you know, Chevy has got many players before on less cap hits. We just saw it with Adam Lowry, so we'll wait and see. If I had to, you know, put money down, it'd probably be around 5.5 on a 5 or 6 year deal, but we'll see what happens. But the point is, I don't know if Andrew Kopp, Kurt Overhart, his agent, of course, I don't know if Overhart and the Jets are going to be able to find that magic number. I mean, right now, I think it's 50-50, guys. Like, I think there's a good chance Kopp re-signs with the Jets, but I wouldn't be surprised if he's traded, just considering the history, arbitration, everything like that. So I guess the question then becomes, what can you get in return for Andrew Kopp? I think, you know, it'll be interesting to see. I would imagine that, you know, it would be prospects and draft picks. Could it be a first rounder? I'm not sure.
Dave?
You know, look, the problem with Andrew Kopp is he's really ideally suited to be that third line. I don't know that he has sufficient offense, and he obviously had opportunity and he did it, but I don't know that he's ideally suited to be a second line guy. I think he has the ability to jump up and play that role, and you know, he's pushed hard to prove to people that he can do more. So, you know, you don't want to limit a guy and say, well, this is his ceiling. But ideally, you know, does he have the dynamic scoring ability to be a guy who's going to get you, you know, what you need out of a second line winger right now for the Winnipeg Jets? You know, would he be able to produce the way a Cole Perfetti, who's you know, again, Cole Perfetti has a ways to go in terms of his development. And I know people want Cole Perfetti to be a center, but you're probably not going to be a center, especially considering the Jets' center depth right now is locked in at Scheifele, Dubois, and Lowry, and potentially Gustafson. So Cole Perfetti could be a dynamic winger, and especially as a young player, you're not bringing him in to be a center in the NHL. You're going to bring him in and let him start on the wing, and then he can work his way. I know people are saying that makes him Roslovic 2.0, but a bit of a different situation based on the circumstances with Perfetti. But again, like I said, so for me, Andrew Kopp, is he suited to be beside Adam Lowry and on, you know, Adam Lowry, who signed for what, 3.125 for 5 years?
Yeah, Adam Lowry signed for 3.25, but close enough.
3.25. So the point is that, you know, to me, is Andrew Kopp best suited for that role? I think so, but I mean, guys, look what Brandon Tanev got with Pittsburgh, right? Brandon Tanev, who we all thought was best suited to be, you know, a third line winger with the Winnipeg Jets, you know, in that, you know, TLC line, then goes and signs that monster deal with Pittsburgh. So, I mean, I'm sure Andrew Kopp is looking at that and saying, well, if him, why not me? And if you're the Jets, are you really thinking to yourself, do you want to tie up that kind of money in a guy who you may think is a third line winger? Or, you know, like, do you want to use that money elsewhere? Do you want to use that money to try and lure a top end defenseman? I mean, you've got guys who can play on the wing. You know, are they going to be as versatile? I mean, David Gustafson, guys, nobody's stopping him from being the next Andrew Kopp. He's smart defensively. He's got decent offensive ability. I mean, what's stopping David Gustafson? And we talked to Pascal Vincent in March.
An opportunity would be the snide response so far.
Well, that's fine. But the point is but I just think you have to be careful in tying up that kind of money in an Andrew Kopp when the one thing that we tend to do is look at what's the here and now, not necessarily the future. And I don't remember who said it last week, but we talked about that idea of GMs having that, a board. And it's like you have to look not at what's happening in 21, 22, but what's happening down the line.
Can we start to Ezzy, are you tearing up on us here? What's going on over there, buddy?
Oh, okay. Well, I've got something in my eye. Like, so you guys know I'm out at the cottage here.
Yeah.
And the air conditioning I'm in the back kind of side room. It's like a sunroom almost. It's so hot right now. Like I'm schwitzing out of control. So I don't know if like sweat is dripping into my eyes, but yeah, my eyes are completely burning it right now. So that's why I'm, rubbing my eyes.
I was going to say, I mean, I know this Andrew Kopp discussion is very emotional. I didn't realize it was that emotional that you were, having a bit of a breakdown on us.
I told Mess I wouldn't cry, Drew.
Yeah. Well, you are a bit of a mess, but that's a separate issue altogether. Go ahead, Dave. Keep going.
I was just, that's fine. But I'm glad Ezzy's good, but maybe we'll have to get him a fan or something like that. But I think next week he's back at the Maison, so he'll be nice and cool in the AC. But I think what it comes down to is, we just have to realize that you always have to account for what's down the line. It's not just give him $5 million and it'll be good for the next 5 years and not think about the consequences and the ramifications. So again, do you want to tie up that kind of money in a player that potentially could be replaced? Like I said, everybody says naturally David Gustafson has to be the fourth line center. Put him as the third line winger. Give him that opportunity to play. Adam Lowry and David Gustafson, guys, that is extremely responsible. And people, Paul Maurice has been big on saying, well, he's got to be able to play more than one role if he wants to play on this team. Can't just play 5-on-5. You have to be able to play in other instances. Well, David Gustafson played PK, played power play, played 5-on-5 for the Manitoba Moose. He's done all of those things. So don't make him your fourth line center. Go and get a veteran fourth line center who Paul Maurice is going to feel comfortable being your fourth line center. If it's not going to be David Gustafson, let David Gustafson come in, replace Andrew Kopp as a third line winger, and you've saved yourself a ton of money. Because again, everybody who thinks that Andrew Kopp is going to come in after a career year and sign a sweetheart, leave money on the table deal, I just don't see it. I just don't see it. So if you're not going to do that and you're going to potentially lose this guy, there are other options. That's all I'm saying in terms of Andrew Kopp. You don't have to throw $6 million a year at a guy who I don't necessarily think is what you need for that second line role on this team.
Well, I just want to clarify. This is Andrew Kopp's, really his only opportunity to make a lot of money in the NHL. He has
all the leverage.
He's got all the leverage, and he should use that leverage. I mean, he should use that leverage and try and get every last penny. I'm not advocating for him to leave money on the table. He's worked hard and climbed the ranks, and he's been a very loyal foot soldier to this Winnipeg Jets team from the start. So if this is his opportunity to cash in for his biggest and longest contract in his NHL career, and it is, because he's not going to have another big one after that, he should get every last penny that he wants to make. And if he chooses to leave some money on the table, that's absolutely his prerogative. But if he also wants to, to make sure the Jets pay for every penny, he should also be able to do that. So I don't begrudge him anything like that at all. Adam Lowry was an interesting case who decided to leave money on the table. Good for him. That was the choice he made. There's absolutely no correlation between what Adam Lowry chose and what Andrew Kopp chose.
This is the business side of hockey, Drew. Like, it happens with every team. Look at like the comparison I've used in the past, Zach Hyman in Toronto. Do the Leafs love Zach Hyman? Is he a good Jewish boy and is he a great hockey player? Yes, he is. I would love to have Zach Hyman on my team. You hear Calgary linked to him. You hear a bunch of teams want Hyman. He's just going to cost too much money for the Leafs. Will another team give him, $5 million a year, or maybe he gets more than that? I don't know. Yeah, but right now for the Leafs and similar situation for the Jets, if the Jets ultimately end up trading Andrew Kopp, it's going to be just because they aren't willing to meet his number. And that doesn't, like you said, he's been a loyal foot soldier. He's done a lot of great things for the organization over the last, I want to say he's been a Jet for 7 years now, but you have to move on. And also, I think you have to factor in Dave, in the third and fourth years of Kopp's contract, if they do sign him, then Ville Heinola is going to be on his contract after the entry level. Cole Perfetti, he's going to be on, his second deal. So you're going to have to factor that in, right? So right now, I would say it's 50-50 whether or not the Jets re-sign Kopp. Based on our conversation, I'm kind of leaning towards the Jets trading him.
Well, and the fascinating part about a trade is, does it happen before 2:00 today? Which would then allow the Jets, assuming...
Let's hope it happens in the next 45 minutes.
That would be great if it happened in the next 45 minutes. But if it does, it'll be interesting to see, do the Jets get back a roster player that they potentially could have to protect unless that player is exempt from the expansion draft, which means they'd be a very young player within their first 2 years of their pro career? Or do they get back, if they make that trade, do they give back draft picks? I tend to agree with Sean Reynolds that it's unlikely, and it would not be, the Jets throughout their history back here have always sort of made moves when that deadline has approached. I don't know that they're considering the expansion draft to truly be that deadline. The deadline for the team might be before an arbitration hearing. That might be more of a deadline. Or maybe they're happy to let Andrew Kopp go right up until, let's say, a trade deadline, and see if they want to trade him then or hold on to him and let him walk into free agency at that point in time, playing on whatever contract he's playing on this coming season. I mean, that's the sort of the chess match that Kevin Cheveldayoff has to figure out as it pertains to Andrew Kopp. The deadline today, the deadline for arbitration, then the actual trade deadline next season. I do believe it's absolutely going to be fascinating what happens with him. He's a confident young man who knows what he wants and knows how much he thinks he's worth. And if you're going to try and, if you're going to take away his UFA years, that means you're going to have to pay up to get those UFA years away from him. It's one of the most fascinating sort of sub-stories to this entire expansion draft, into this entire Winnipeg Jets offseason.
Yeah, and if you think about it, guys, if the Jets think they are going to trade Andrew Kopp, I think that there's more pressure on them not to lose Mason Appleton. That might just be me, because if you lose Kopp and Appleton, obviously there's going to be a big hole on the wings, right? But there always is the chance that in an Andrew Kopp trade, they acquire a forward that can potentially replace him. But I think, when you talk about, the forwards that can make a jump up to the second or third line, Dave's absolutely right. You're talking about Christian Vesalainen and you're talking about David Gustafsson, a first-round pick in 2017 and a second-round pick in 2018. Those are the guys that I think that you would say, if the Jets are going to look to replace those players from within, it's going to be Gustafsson and Vesalainen.
Yeah, that would be likely the story, and it'll be very fascinating to see what the Jets decide to do. I'll tell you what, let's take our final break of the show. Craig Button is set to join us any minute now to talk about the expansion draft and to talk about free agency. We'll hopefully get Craig in here on the other side of these. You're watching, you're chatting, you're listening to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. We're live on our YouTube channel and all of our social media platforms.
Keeping Winnipeg laughing for over 30 years. Rumors, Canada's longest-running comedy club, bringing you the biggest laughs from the best comedians on the planet. Jerry Seinfeld, Chris Rock, Jon Stewart, Dennis Miller, Brad Garrett, the greats, and all the up-and-comers too. When was the last time you laughed out loud? Make it a great night out with friends, or book your office or birthday party. Even a fundraising event at Rumors. Get all the details and dates on upcoming shows at rumorscomedyclub.com.
Hey, Drew.
Ezzy, whoa, what a smile!
Yeah, I got my crowns done at Linden Market Dental Center, and they whiten my teeth.
I see.
They're so bright that every time I smile, they go,
"We have hockey tonight. Do you have a mouth guard to protect those pearly whites?"
I sure do.
Whoa, they even ting through the mouth guard.
Linden Market Dental Center covers all your dental needs, from restorative to cosmetic dentistry, and will fit you with a sports guard for that active lifestyle. 877 Waverly. See lindenmarketdental.com.
Hi, it's Drew from Illegal Curve here. Selling your home can be stressful, but it wasn't for me. Thanks to my friends at Zappia Group Realty, they made the process so easy. My home sold within 48 hours and with multiple offers. Zappia Group Realty took care of everything with their exquisite customer service and attention to detail. If you want to sell your home for more in less time, get started by talking to Frank and Mauro Zappia of Zappia Group Realty. Online at zappiagroup.com.
While you can't always count on your team winning, nor your favorite player scoring, one thing you can always count on is Bernstein's Deli. They've expanded their services because the team at Bernstein's Deli wants to accommodate your needs and keep you safe. Open Tuesday to Saturday from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. to serve you. Head to your phone, in-store or online to shop for groceries or order meals from the restaurant, like the legendary Illegal Curve sandwich. Just go to bernsteinsdeli.com.
So you're a pizza person, you married a wing person, but somehow your kids are salad people. You can't pick your fam, but you can pick your BP meal deal, starting from $18.99 for takeout or delivery at bostonpizza.com.
Saturday morning, welcome back to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. We're commercially free from now till the end of the broadcast, so settle in and join us for some quality hockey talk. As you can see, TSN Director of Scouting, good friend of the program, Craig Button, joins us on the show now. Craig, good morning. Nice to see you. How are things?
Things are great, and it's a beautiful Saturday morning. And what are we? 6 days from the NHL entry draft first round, and then it heats up on Saturday. Last year at the draft when they did it virtually, usually the 2nd to 7th rounds, it zips off in no time whatsoever. But because of the virtual scenario, it took a lot longer. I can tell you this, they're trying to streamline that this year, because I think the most frustrated of anybody was the NHL teams, because they had become accustomed to the rapid advancement of the draft on day 2. But hey, it's exciting. You know what? We're in a space, in a place where we're moving forward in our world, and certainly with the draft and expansion coming up, it makes things seem that we're back on a path that's a little bit more normal.
Exactly. More normalcy, the better. And to your point there, Craig, we're going to have live coverage of the NHL draft next Friday back here on our YouTube channel. And then Saturday, rounds 2 through 7, the second day of the NHL draft, coverage back here on our YouTube channel as well. So we encourage everybody to join us for that, as well as Wednesday with our special expansion draft coverage. So an absolutely hectic week, a hectic 10 days ahead of us between now and, of course, free agency, which is only about 10 or 11 days away, so it should be fun, Craig.
Oh yeah, you guys are amazing. Like, really, I say that with admiration and respect. No, but one of the beautiful things about our country is that hockey connects us from coast to coast and everywhere in between. It really does. I mean, it is something. But you get into these NHL hockey pockets, and certainly Winnipeg is one of the best. I mean, are there better? No, there might be bigger, but they're not better. And so to be able to serve and, provide the content you guys do to the passionate hockey fans, it's phenomenal. I really do. The respect and admiration is high.
We appreciate that, Craig. That's very kind of you to say. We're going to get into the NHL draft with you. But first, I want to talk about your Craig's protected list, which I have up here on my second screen ahead of the expansion draft on Wednesday. And really all show long, we've been talking about it. The people in the chat have been talking about the decision the Jets have faced between Stanley or DeMello, which one to protect. And putting on your GM hat, you actually thought the Jets should protect, or are going to protect, Logan Stanley ahead of Dylan DeMello. Can you maybe walk our audience through your reasoning behind that?
Okay, so one thing is it's what I think they should do. Okay. I'm not Darren Drager, Pierre LeBrun, Bob McKenzie. Those are the insiders. Those are the guys that tell you what is happening and what could potentially. I'm putting on my hat to say this is what I think they should do. Now, I think the emergence of Logan Stanley over the season and certainly into the playoffs, was reason for a lot of positive optimism. I guess there's no. Is there any such thing as negative optimism? I guess that's
tempered optimism.
Yeah. Thank you, Ezra. Thank you very much. Okay, but I do think there is a reason for optimism with this emergence. And when you look at I know Dylan Sandberg's coming, and I love Dylan Sandberg, and I love his potential. And you look at, but their blue line, with Logan Stanley, and it has a mix. What you want to be careful of is that you don't get too skewed one way or another. Everybody talks about size or lack of size or whatnot, and you need all the different elements. So watching Logan play, and we know that he was a first-round pick 5 years ago, but he's continuously developed, and he has a very unique skill set and physical attributes. And now that he's demonstrated that those attributes can be really effective in the game, I think it just really rounds out a blue line, with Josh Morrissey on it, with Neil Pionk on it, with Ville Heinola coming, that gives you a different feel. And like I talked about Dylan Sandberg, I think it just works in that regard. It's not that Dylan DeMello isn't a good player or solid player. I just think for the Winnipeg Jets, where do you find a player that, number one, you believed in when you drafted him in the first call, have spent significant amounts of development time with him, have watched him progress, and now you're going to go lose him? I just don't see that as something that helps the Winnipeg Jets. I'm not saying losing Dylan DeMello helps either, but I think that Logan Stanley, what he's demonstrated, is a player you want to keep.
Yeah, I think you make a lot of good points, Craig. And I think, a couple of weeks ago, I was leaning towards Dylan DeMello, and now as we get closer and closer to the expansion draft next Wednesday, it's looking more and more likely it is going to be Logan Stanley, and then we'll wait and see, if the Jets can swing a deal to ensure that Seattle doesn't take Dylan DeMello. But I wanted to switch to the 2021 NHL draft, because it seems like, with roughly a week to go, or not roughly, exactly a week to go before the NHL draft, it seems like with the expansion draft, it's kind of it's upstaged the NHL draft. And obviously, the Jets have, the late first round pick at 18th overall. But before we get into, the Jets and, who they might take at 18th overall, just looking at the top, your most recent Craigslist came out, and obviously Owen Power out of Michigan, he, as you mentioned in the article, he seems destined, to be the first overall pick. How open is it, do you think, though, after Owen Power? Like, you have Brandt Clark at number 2, but obviously Matty Beniers could easily go number 2 to Seattle. Like, how difficult of a decision do you think it's going to be for Seattle, who to take at that second overall slot?
So two things I would say, Ezra, is I think Seattle has a blank canvas, and I think there's really good players that they have a choice of. They're going to have to put a stake in the ground with their first draft pick ever. And whether it's Matty Beniers or Brandt Clark or Simon Edvinsson or William Eklund, whoever it may be, right? Like, we're talking about good players. But what I would say to you is, just by those 4 names I just mentioned, I think it's wide open. Like, I really do. I don't think there's, I go back to the 2018 draft, and that was the 2000 borns. And I know going into the draft, we were so clear about who the first 12 picks were going to be. We were clear on it. But what we weren't clear on was what the order was going to be. We did not know. We did not know what that. We knew Rasmus Dahlin was going 1, and we knew Andrei Svechnikov was going number 2. And from 3 to 12, we had it nailed on the next 10 players. The order was wide. I may have shared this with you previously, but Noah Dobson, who went 12th to the New York Islanders, they had the back-to-back picks. They took Wahlstrom and Dobson 11-12. I know there was teams that were picking before, or like in the single digits of that first round, that if the player that they ultimately selected wasn't there, Dobson was their next guy. So it all depends on how you're looking at it. So Ezra, I think that there's a real opportunity for teams to just say, this is the guy we want. I know I've mentioned this before. I'm not a believer in best player available, because if it was always about best player available, it would be obvious to everybody. I'd be able to come right to you and tell you, you know what? Oh, it's easy. Number 2, he's the best player available. And number 3 is the best player available. It's always a group of players. And each of those players, I just mentioned Brandt Clark. I'm just not in any order. Simon Edvinsson, William Eklund, Matty Beniers. They're all different. They're all different players. They all add different elements to the game. I think they're all strong. I have Brandt Clark number 2 on my list because, quite frankly, I love the kid. I love the way he plays. But I know that that's not universally shared, and it doesn't mean that I'm wrong or I'm right. It just means that there's a lot of different viewpoints on these players. So I think as you move through, and I do believe that Owen Power stands alone. Like, I do believe, I have a line right under his name. I do. So just to be clear on that. But after that, Dylan Guenther's a really good player. People ask me, I go, it's not that I don't like Dylan Guenther. But he's good. Mason McTavish is good. The goaltender, Wallstad, is good. These are good players. So it's open. It's really open. And I'll just finish with this, Ezra, is that I think the quality of player, and I'm talking quality, like, let me define it. Offensive potential players, forwards, top 6 forwards, top 4 defensemen, number 1 goaltenders, goes well into the second round.
Craig, it's interesting because you're talking about best player available, and I'm curious what teams really kind of look at that because versus organizational needs, right? Because, for example, the Jets, let's say a good Winnipeg boy, Carson Lambos, who could potentially go to them in that spot, left shot defenseman. Well, the Jets have a lot of left shot defensemen. You talked about it. Logan Stanley, Ville Heinola, Dylan Samberg, Declan Chisholm. Those are just 4 guys who are all good, young left shot defensemen. So if you're the Winnipeg Jets, do you say, well, we really only have Leon Gabanke and Johnny Kovacevic on the right side. We need to restock that way. So we'll have to veer away from a player like Carson Lambos. Or do you just say, that's a player we like, we're going to get him regardless of whether we've got a glut of that already?
So, Dave, I think you just described the process of trying to, make a decision on different players. It's not that you don't recognize that a player, and let's just use Carson. And are there any others, like you said, a good Winnipeg boy? Are there any other kinds?
Yes.
Well, yeah, Drew. Okay. I'm just asking. Anyway, all kidding aside. But so you're looking and you recognize, hey, Carson's a good player, but then you start to go through your organization and you start to say, geez, we have all these players that you just mentioned, right? And Ville, for me, what it would come down to, if you're just debating whether you should take, I don't think there's any question that you look at a player like Carson, you go, that's a good player, right? But now you start to look at your team and you start to go, for me, and they got him right in a similar spot of where they're picking in Ville Heinola. I think you have to ask yourself the question is Carson Lambos better than Ville Heinola? And it's not about a little bit better. To me, you already have that player. And I'm not saying you don't want more of that type of player because I think Ville Heinola is a terrific player and I think Carson Lambos is a really good prospect. But I think that's where you start to be able to form your list. And with respect to, it's not that you say Carson Lambos, and let me just use a number. It's not that he ends up, let's just pick 3 guys. It's not that he ends up number 3 on your list because he's not good. It just becomes these other considerations, Dave. And I think that they're not only important considerations, they're absolutely the considerations that teams look at when they're looking to draft a player because it is close. If Carson Lambos was absolutely the best player available there, you just say, okay, we're 5 years away or 4 years away from him playing. We just take him. But that's not the case.
Craig Button is our guest on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Craig, of course, as TSN's director of scouting, the first round of the NHL draft, 6 days away from now. That'll be Friday night. And then next Saturday, rounds 2 through 7. And we echo your comments, Craig. We do hope it goes quicker than it did last year. It certainly devolved into a bit of a slog on that when everything was done that one day. It was a long, long day. I think I asked you this before. It's been talked about, the idea that the knowledge base on prospects this year might not be what it's like in a typical year, coming off of a typical season where there's a big scouting report and there's many opportunities to watch these guys. Do you think that will eventually sort of rear its head when we get closer to the Friday's first round? Or do you think that is, again, something that I and maybe other people are overblowing as too much of a factor?
No, it's not overblowing it at all. It's a fact. I mean, let's keep in mind, since March of 2020, there was a 13-month. Now, I know there was players like Dylan Guenther played 12 games in the Western Hockey League before going to the U18. Played a couple of games in the Alberta Junior Hockey League. We're talking about a sample size for Dylan Guenther of just about 20 games. And we're not just talking about, significant games. Last year, down the stretch, into the playoffs for the Edmonton Oil Kings. Into the summer with the U18, the Hlinka Gretzky. Now you get to watch them and all the things that are part of the evaluation process. So when you use the word knowledge, Drew, teams just don't have the knowledge on these players. And continuing it forward, they don't have that affects the confidence they have in projecting the players. It's not about saying I like this guy or don't like this guy, but by watching them and having that period of time, I call it data points. You know, it's not one data point, it's a continuous line of data points where you're evaluating that gives you the confidence that says, you know, this is the group of players we really like, and we really like this guy, and we're really going to go and get. Think about Mark Scheifele. Let's just, you know, the first pick in Winnipeg Jets, you know, in the franchise. You know, like I remember, like he was on a bad team. He was on a bad team in Barrie. And I remember it was the last game of the season. They were going to play Mississauga. And Mississauga won the league that year. They were a really good team. And I said, oh, geez, last game of the season. Do I want to go over there at 2:00 in the afternoon? I had things to do that night, you know, on the panel. And I just said, no, I'm going to go over there. It was a 3-2 game for Mississauga. You wouldn't know that Mississauga was the best team in the league in Barrie. They played hard. I mean, no surprise with Dale Howardchuk coaching. And they played hard. Then Mark went to the U18 tournament. But you had all this time to have watched Mark, you know, progress in his game, which now you're coming to the 7th pick, and it doesn't matter where somebody else has him rated. You're going, that's our guy. And that's exactly what the Winnipeg Jets did. So when I bring that up because you want greater confidence. It's not that you're hesitant on your evaluation. It's the confidence it gives you. That's our guy. And so that's going to be impacted by every single team and if you don't recognize it, if you don't recognize that your knowledge base is less and you haven't had the opportunity to watch his progression and factor it into where you're at, then you are going to be overconfident. And that's going to be a bigger problem. And it doesn't mean that you can't have a level of confidence, but that's going to affect every single team group. And so will we see a Mark Scheifele? Will we see a Jack Quinn get drafted 8th overall like he was last year by Buffalo? They're going to be those players in the draft, but are they going to go at that point in the draft? Because it's that confidence level that increases that says, that's our guy. Because I remember, like with Mark Scheifele, people were like, oh, my Lord, they're surprised. Well, look what
the Jets had confidence.
Bingo. And he's a superstar.
Craig, I wanted to ask you about Atu Ratty, and I apologize if I'm mispronouncing his name. I know we've talked to you about him before, around World Juniors time and a year ago, and he's obviously a guy that is no longer considered to be a top 5 or top 10 pick. If I'm not mistaken, I think you had him number 23 on your final Craigslist. Like, what is your kind of assessment of where Ratty is being considered going into the draft? Because as we said, it's expected that he's more of a late first rounder. But do you think? And again, I'm not going to put you on the spot here because obviously we don't know what the Jets amateur scouting staff their lists are. But like, is he a player that the Jets would even consider taking at number 18?
Well, I mean, if we look at range of players based on my list, I would answer that question yes. Right, because I do think, it's always interesting with players, and I get asked this question lots with prospects. They go, well, you had him high. You had him as a player that could, potentially be considered in the first overall. I said, yeah, that was then. This is now. And again, I just used the data point discussion. Yeah, you're watching up to a period of time, and that's why you got to continuously evaluate the players. And there's players that when you're talking about Atu Rat, I believe it's pronounced Ratu. It's Atu Ratu. But like I have a tough time, Ezra, not saying Ratty because it's just sitting there.
It spells
ratty,
it.
Right? Yeah. Anyway, but that that's how it's pronounced. But you watch him, but there's a lot of other players that you don't have the data points on either, right? So how can you start to say, like, for an example, that William Eklund is a real top-notch player? How can you say at that point in time that Matthew Coronado is so good? You can't, because you don't have the data points on them to make that. So you're working with up to that point in time. That being said, I think that Atu really, he had a challenging year, and I've seen that in a lot of different draft years with different players. And I know in the past I just said, come on, but it's a factor. This is what I would say now about Atu, is that I think that watching him early on, there might have been a little bit more overzealousness in terms of projecting him that high. But I also think that on the flip side, you better be careful about being underzealous about what he is. I compare him now to William Karlsson with the Vegas Golden Knights. I think that he's an excellent skater that can play the game in two ways. I know William scored 41 goals. He's never going to score 30 again, in my view, but he's a really good player. And I think that Ratu can be that type of a player. Now, can he be as good as William Karlsson? I don't know, but that's where I've come to on Ratu. And, we'll see where it goes. But when you have, he's 6'2", he's an excellent skater. We're talking excellent skater. And he wants to drive the play into the hard areas with the puck, without the puck. And I think that his ability to play really well all around the ice are real good, strong qualities for him. So when you ask me, could he be a consideration? I would say yes. I would absolutely say, should he be? Yeah.
Craig Button, our guest on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show Saturday morning. We're live on our YouTube channel and all of our social media platforms talking about the NHL draft with Craig. He's TSN's Director of Scouting.
Craig, one of the things I always wonder is do fans sometimes forget about, they create expectations for these young players, but these players are so far away from playing even pro hockey. And we tend to look, and like I said, we have a Jets focus here on this show generally, but you look at the Jets, right? They've got an experienced forward group. They've got a youngish defensive group. They've got really good young defensive prospects. Their forward group, in terms of depth in the prospect pool, really is limited really to Cole Perfetti, David Gustafsson, Christian Vesalainen, and then you got maybe a Nathan Smith in college. But when you're looking at a draft from a Jets perspective, right, and you're saying, well, we got to restock the cupboard, the reality is most of these players aren't going to be restocking your AHL cupboard. You're really going to be restocking kind of from the future depth. Is that not a more accurate way of looking at this?
It absolutely is, and that's why you got to be really careful. And I don't think you should be doing it when people say needs. You're gonna fit your needs with 17 and 18-year-old players. They better be named Crosby or Ovechkin or McDavid, because those are the guys that come in. And I'll give just look at the last two drafts. 2 years ago, Jack Hughes, Capo Caco, and Kirby Dach came into the league. 1, 2, 3 picks. They didn't contribute to their teams. They played, and they were essentially developing in the NHL. Alexis Lafreniere, who was a phenomenal junior player, went first. He played. He got better probably in the last. He probably showed his footing in the last 20 games of the season. So, and the reason I bring that up, Dave, is because I know that one of the things I tried to be very cautious of working with teams, and still at this point in time, is manage those expectations. I really try to do. I'll share a quick story with you that really opened my eyes to it. And it was in, I forget what year it was. It might have been 93, 94. We were in Dallas, and Mike Modano, first overall pick, right? And we're sitting in training camp, and we're just sitting, and we're chatting. And he says to me, he goes, Craig, why do we say that when we draft a player, he's going to be a 30-goal scorer? I said, well, I mean, we sit there. He goes, he says, we get excited when we hear about a potential 30-goal scorer coming to our team. And I said, yeah. He goes, yeah. And then he goes, so if that player ends up being a 30-goal scorer, he goes, he's just what he was supposed to be. But he says, if somehow he doesn't end up being a 30-goal scorer, there tends to be a disappointment that he didn't reach it. He goes, why don't we just talk about the players, about what we see them as and what we like them and how we're going to try to. And I remember sitting there thinking to myself, I go, that is brilliant. It's like that. So that was Mike, a first overall pick who comes with massive expectations, right? Sharing that with me. And I from that point on, we never used he'll be a 30-goal scorer. Now, I know I think he could be a top pair defenseman or a first-line winger, or first-line center, but I'm not trying to put, he'll be a 100-point scorer. I try to be realistic in where I'm at if they do better. And I try to undersell it. When I say undersell, I try to modify my projections on that. So to your point, Dave, we create those expectations, which isn't fair to the players. And I hear this all the time. Oh, he is going to be great. And I know when I worked doing the draft for NBC, the senior vice president would tell us, he goes, There's maybe a couple of great players. I don't want to hear great on every single player in the first round, but we tend to do that, but it's not fair. So to your point, it's managing those expectations, understanding that what are you trying to do with these players come through. I just talked about Logan Stanley. He was a first-round pick in 2016, and oh my God, he's not going to make it. Like, you know, one of the guys I work with, our managing editor at TSN, Steve Dryden, he always jokes with me, if a guy's not in the NHL at 20, he always says, how old is he now, like 37? Well, Steve, the kid's 1 year out of junior. Like, give it a break.
Craig, we'll let you go on this last question. I mean, every year, people like yourself, other people who are evaluating the draft have, those players that they just think very highly of, that they think that, they might not necessarily be at the top of everyone's mind, but they have that high ceiling that if everything shakes out, they can elevate to their where they were drafted from. To your mind, if you look at these players, who's that guy or a couple of those guys that you think, if they get into the right spot and if the pieces, fall the way they should fall, that they might be able to exceed their draft position?
Well, and we talk about exceeding the draft position, right? And I think that's important. So I'm going to give you an example, and someone very close to you guys, and that's Kyle Connor. So in his draft, I'd watched Kyle for a number of years, and like the more I watched him, the more I was like, this guy's a no-brainer. Like, he's so good, right? And I believe, like, if I go back in time, I don't know, I believe I had him 5 or 6 on my final list. I had Brock Besser in the top 10, and like they were both players playing in the USHL. I can't begin to tell you how much I was grilled by NHL teams. Geez, you have this guy high, you have this guy, and I would just explain to them, here's what I see in them, and here's why, and everything, right? And and that doesn't mean you're all. I use, obviously those are good positive examples. I've had other players that I rated highly that didn't turn out to the extent that I thought, but you recognize that. But it's again watching them, and people ask me all the time, what do you like while he played in high school? I said, I'm not watching him play in high school. I'm watching the player and looking at his attributes and skills and trying to project it to the NHL. The measuring stick is the NHL. It's not high school level or USHL level or Western Hockey League level. I'm trying to take what they have and project it. So I'm always looking for those qualities. And for me, you have to skate. You have to be able to have basic requisite skills at that level, right? But the things that I think really translate well are hockey sense, being able to process the game quickly, be able to do things quickly, because as you get to the NHL, the players are faster, quicker, and the space you have to operate in is much smaller. So that's where I'm trying to always look. So if there's 2 players in this draft that I absolutely love. Fyodor Svechkov, who I have 6th on my list. He's a centerman from Russia. I watch him play, and I've watched him play for a few years, and all I see, and he's not this guy, but he plays the game like this guy. It's Pavel Datsyuk. Pavel Datsyuk played the game everywhere, and he made everybody around him better, the players, the team, everything better. And he did it at a high level of competitiveness and with really top-end skill. And so that's one of the guys that I really absolutely love, and I really think there is so much there. And there's a third guy here that I think, but the next 2 guys are Matthew Coronado and Cole Sillinger. And I just think that, Matthew, I'm starting to read now, the only thing he lacks is height. Going, oh my God. Really? We're going to go down that path again? And then Cole Sillinger. Well, he's not the fastest guy. Just watch the game. Cole Sillinger, wherever the game is being played, it matters. And then I'm going to throw one more guy at you to finish. I started with Kyle Connor. I'm going to finish with a Winnipeg Jet 1.0. And I love him, and I think he's going to be a really good NHL player. And that's Josh Domi, Shane's son.
Okay.
He was like 5'4". I first saw Josh play at the USHL Fall Classic in Pittsburgh. He was a midget player. So they had all these midget players in this midget. They had 16 midget teams come in. Joe Nieuwendyke's son was there. Jackson, Scott Niedermayer's son was there. And so they're all there. So you go over and you watch, because you're right there watching as you're watching some of the USHL prospects. And so Josh was like 5'4". I'm telling you, 5'4", maybe 130 pounds. And all he's done is grown. I said last year he would be an excellent later round pick, because you're going to feel he's going in the first 2 rounds this year. He might. I'm not going to rule him out going later in the first round. He's that good. And so there's other players, but when I mentioned those 4 players, you have a player that went through a draft. You have a Russian centerman that like people like they're paying attention. Trust me, they know how good he is. Then you have Coronado and Sillinger that inevitably people look at. Oh, he's not the fastest skater. He's not the biggest guy. Who cares? Is Nikolai Ehlers big?
Nope.
He's just good, right?
Sometimes it's that simple, isn't it?
Well, I think it is. I mean, I'll never forget Claude Ruel, the late Claude Ruel, who worked for the Montreal Canadiens in every single capacity. It was outstanding. I think he should be in the Hall of Fame personally. I remember him telling me early on and when I started scouting, Craig, watch the guy that has the puck all the time. That's the good player.
Good advice. That's some good advice. Craig Button is TSN's director of scouting. The NHL draft first round is next Friday. Day 2 is next Saturday. We'll have complete coverage of it here on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Craig will do a great job with our friends at TSN covering the draft as well. Always appreciate your time. Always appreciate your insight, Craig. You've been a gentleman to us for many years, and we always appreciate it.
Yeah, and then, like I'll tell you this: if you want me to join in at some point next Friday or Saturday during the draft, like I'm not doing the draft this year for NBC, so there's a wide berth there. If and I know it's flexible and fluid, but if you feel that you'd like to have some commentary or some thoughts, don't hesitate to reach out. I'd be happy to join you.
I can guarantee
Thanks
you now.
so much, Craig. Appreciate it.
Expect the text message from us this week.
No problem.
I text you every week anyways, right? Like I'm always sending you the emoticons and everything like that. But no, we appreciate it. We always love having you on this time of year. We always love having you on anytime. So we really do appreciate that. And we always appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, thank you. Love joining you guys.
Take care, Craig. We'll talk to you again next week in that case. Thanks so much.
Yeah.
There he goes, Craig Button, our guest here on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show.
I don't know how many people, Drew, knew that Shane Doan's son was draft eligible, and we didn't get into it that much. But I mean, obviously, there's going to be all of the talk that the Coyotes are going to draft him, right? But he's actually committed to Arizona State University, which is a new hockey program, as you guys know, right? So he's going to play there, but. Can you imagine if the Winnipeg Jets drafted Shane Doan's kid? Like that's full circle, right?
That would certainly make me feel really old, but yes, it is full circle. Yeah. Josh Doan, number 40 on Craig's latest Craigslist, put up 65 points in 50 games playing for the Chicago Steel of the USHL really good player last year. Yeah. So that'll be certainly a good name to keep an eye on. And we will certainly do everything in our power to get Craig on with us during our broadcast.
Just a wee bit of insight from Craig Button.
Just a wee bit of insight.
He's the best. He's the best. And I meant it. Like we've been lucky. We've been having Craig, on Illegal Curve for the last 10 plus years. And, there's nobody more knowledgeable than him. And he was right. I remember, about Kyle Connor, Dave, like we were at that draft in 2015 in Sunrise. And we had Craig on. We were jumping on with Huss and Lawless because Lawless was part of the show back then. He hadn't left for Vegas, obviously. And, he went 17th overall. And you guys remember those 3 draft picks.
Somebody tell Don Sweeney.
Well, they could have had Matt Barzell or Kyle Connor instead. We know who they took. So
yes,
Jake DeBrusk was a pretty good pick, though.
Jake DeBrusk has turned out to be an okay player, but the rest of them has certainly been some tough sledding for Don Sweeney and the Boston Bruins to overcome that little bit of a draft debacle. Let me just recap and remind everybody what we have in store for this coming week. Wednesday night, the NHL expansion draft, live coverage, live analysis going right here on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. It'll be the Illegal Curve presents the NHL expansion draft Wednesday. That'll be right around 7:15, 7:30, right in that time frame. We're going to finalize and nail down the time we're going to go live. I'll be honest, it's on me. I'm coaching my son's soccer team that evening, so as soon as I get back home, we'll be live here.
Ezzy and I might go live earlier.
You guys can go live earlier. You tell me what you guys want to go live.
If you need an assistant coach or a guest coach, you do know that I coach, ref soccer for many years. I actually did coach with my dad one year. That was a long time ago, but I did ref soccer for many years. So if you need me to, practice some corner kicks or throw-ins or anything like that, Big Daddy can dust off his cleats.
For the record, City Chaps right here with the Vince Lee Stings. Hashtag no big deal. 2 years in a row.
Yeah, for the record, these are 3 and 4-year-olds, so corner kicks.
I'll dominate them. I'll dominate those kids.
That's right. You're be like Kramer in the dojo beating up the kids there. I'm just trying to get the kids to stop tripping over the ball when they run up to kick it. So
they used to call Dave M the Hebrew Hammer in the North End. Everybody feared Dave M. He had a great kick.
Yeah, he was the Messi of North End Winnipeg soccer back in the day. Anyways, Wednesday night expansion draft coverage right here on our YouTube channel. Friday night, round 1 of the NHL draft, 7 p.m. First round coverage right here on our YouTube channel. Saturday's Illegal Curve Hockey Show is going to start an hour later, 10 a.m. to coincide with the start of the day 2 of the NHL draft. So the Jets picks in round 2, round 3, you're going to have them here live on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show next Saturday. Illegal Curve presents day 2 of the NHL draft. And then Wednesday, the 28th of July, that'll be the first day of NHL free agency. We're going to recap everything that happened that night, I think right around 8 o'clock p.m. The Illegal Curve presents the free agency recap show. So a very busy 10, 11 days in store for you here on the Illegal Curve YouTube channel, on our Facebook page, on our Twitter feed. Tell your friends, tell your family. The only live coverage, as far as I know, that about all these events is going to be with us here on the Illegal Curve YouTube channel and all of our social
smash that like button, people. Come on, let's go.
All I know is, Dave M, you better fire up that AC for all these shows, because out here at the cottage, I don't get that luxury of having that great AC that you've got. So make sure it's as cold as you can get it.
Cold as ice, Ezzy. Cold as ice.
There you go. Let's wrap up the Saturday morning with a couple of news and notes, some interesting moves around the NHL this week we want to touch base on. Duncan Keith is no longer a member of the Chicago Blackhawks. He's now a member of the Edmonton Oilers. He goes to Edmonton in exchange for defenseman Caleb Jones and a conditional third-round pick that can even move higher depending on the success the Oilers have with Duncan Keith. The consensus from most everybody is that the Oilers overpaid. Are you guys willing to take a different tact, or do you think that the Oilers did overpay for Duncan Keith?
I think there's no doubt, Drew, that the Oilers overpaid. And look, we all know Duncan Keith is not the same player, that he used to be. He's in the back 9 of his career, right? He's only got a few years left in the NHL, but the Oilers are clearly, that was a guy they targeted. I just think, it would have been nice if the Blackhawks retained some salary. That's to me what was the most surprising. And so not only did they get Caleb Jones, they also get the draft pick. Like, I just think it was an overpay. I understand why Ken Holland brought in Keith, like he's looking to upgrade his defense, but you don't have a lot of cap space there. You've signed Nugent Hopkins to the 8-year deal. You've brought in Duncan Keith, who's making, what is he making? $7 million a year, $7.5 million a year. And you need money you still need to re-sign Adam Larson. They might not be able to re-sign Adam Larson, guys. That's why you've heard, the Jets might be interested in him. So I just think, it was too much to give up, because Caleb Jones is a pretty good defenseman. Like, he's obviously, not a guy that you would call a top pairing guy, but he could absolutely be a second pairing guy for Chicago. So I like that move for the Blackhawks, and we'll see if the Blackhawks go after Seth Jones now.
Keith making $5.5 million a year, but your point stands as definitely an overpayment. Let's go to Minnesota, Dave, where the big news of the week came out with the Wild announcing that they're buying out Zach Parise, which that in and of itself wasn't, I guess, a stunner. The stunner was that they're also buying out Ryan Suter. This came as really landed shockwaves throughout the NHL, because Ryan Suter is still a guy who can play. I would still have him as a top 30 defenseman in the NHL.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And if you're the Oilers, you're thinking to yourself, this happened a day after we just traded for Duncan Keith. We could have had Suter for free, basically. Obviously, if he would have gone to Edmonton, he's going to have his pick of teams, I think. And you know what? I read an article in the Minneapolis Star Tribune the after kind of the fall it had finished, And it sounds like it was just a clash of personalities there. It really did sound like it was just time to break up. And I'd heard that. I'd talked to some people who were connected to folks in Minnesota.
Well, Suter hung up on Billy Guerin. If you read Michael Russo's column in The Athletic, Dave, like Suter, he hung up. Like Parise, I think, expected it, right?
He was a healthy scratch during the playoffs.
That was the first time in his career. I mean, Parise's, let's be honest, he's played over 1,000 NHL games, over 800 career points. Like this guy's had an unbelievable career. But with the injury history, Dave, I think he expected it. I don't think Ryan Suter expected it.
No, I don't think so either. But I think to the point is that it just became like I said, it was this clash of personalities, and it sounded like I think the quote was like, when a player is willing to just call the owner on, without kind of going around the GM and that sort of thing. It just sounded like, and like I was about to say, I'd heard that the Minnesota room was rather cliquish and segmented. So I'm not really surprised that Bill Guerin.
I've never heard that before.
Yeah. So I'm not sure if the Bill Guerin had tried to put his stamp on this team and just try and clean house a little bit. So, and obviously free up some money, for some signings for, the young players that they've got in their organization.
I know it's
a little bit of money this year, but the money that's going to be on their cap is
3-4 years. It's like $10 million.
No, I think it's even more, like $14 million. But it's going to be incredible. It's just a fascinating situation in Minnesota, and Bill Guerin really no shrinking violet going in there and cleaning up the mess that I believe Paul Fenton made when he was briefly general manager, and Bill Guerin going in there and not wasting any time in changing some things in Minnesota, and he had some success this year. Nobody had them in a playoffs, and they had a pretty good run this season. Final one that I want to touch on before we wrap up on this Saturday morning, of course, the news out of Montreal that Shea Weber's career is in jeopardy. Just the years of battling, he's got injuries galore, ankle injuries, and those are certainly serious, as we've seen here in Winnipeg with a guy like Dustin Byfuglien. Just you hope that it's not the end for Shea Weber. But if it is, just a fantastic hockey player, the definition I would suggest of the word hockey warrior, with not able to ever raise Lord Stanley's Cup, but certainly had so much incredible success at the international level for Team Canada as well as.
Well, there's no doubt he's a Hall of Famer. Like, I don't think anybody's gonna, dispute that. Shea Weber will be a Hall of Famer. He's one of the best defensemen of all time. Yeah, you're right, Drew. I mean, just unfortunate, right? Because he gets so close, 3 wins away from winning his first Stanley Cup, and he kind of knew that he was dealing with a few things. You nailed it. Warrior is the best way to describe him. Just a tough as nails defenseman, but also a guy that could put 20 goals in earlier in his career, obviously. So just the big booming slap shot is what everyone's going to remember, but also just how good of a defenseman he was most recently in the playoffs, right? Like, Shea Weber was not like a third pairing defenseman. This is a guy who played a key role on that Canadiens team, right? So yeah, it's going to be really tough to replace him. And obviously, the Habs are, pretty good on defense, but they're definitely going to be a little bit weaker on the right side. You've obviously still got Jeff Petrie there. I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens in the expansion draft, because Joel Edmondson is going to be exposed, and obviously Joel Edmondson's more of a third pairing guy, even though he can play a second pairing role. Interesting to see if Seattle takes him if he's exposed, but just unfortunate news for Montreal, because Montreal is a team heading in the right direction, but without Shea Weber, it's just a big hole on defense that you just can't fill. You're never going to fill that hole.
Well, I'll tell you one thing's for sure. If he chooses to retire as opposed to go on LTIR, the cap recapture penalty for the Nashville Predators is a mere $24.5 million. Now, granted, that will be spread over 5 years, but that's still a lot of money that you have to have dead money on your books. That has to go with, of course, the contract when it was signed was heavily front-loaded and blah, blah, blah. But the Nashville Predators are certainly hoping that it's more of an LTIR situation for Nashville. And not
$24 million, by the way, was also the same amount that Kenny and Rennie offered Dave Minuk to join them. But Dave said, no, I mean, there's no amount of money I'm taking. I'm never leaving a legal curve, right, Dave?
Dave is a loyal man, a hometown discount for us as it pertains to Mr.
KennyandRennie.com does not sound as good as illegalcurve.com.
That's true. Dave M knows that indeed.
By the way, as a quick aside on Shea Weber, wouldn't it be interesting if he's able to rehab all season?
Yeah,
and then perhaps free up some space for a la Nikita Kucherov, come back and play in the playoffs.
What a magical journey that would be, Dave. You're absolutely right. Wouldn't that be just an absolute miracle of miracles? Quickly, just want to remind everybody that the show's over for today, but if there's any news breaking between now and, of course, when we're back on next Wednesday, illegalcurve.com is your home for all of that news. And if it's really newsworthy, really, truly newsworthy, maybe we'll do a special show, but that'll be a pop-up show.
Yeah,
that
as he'll be on the Bird River in like one of those little tubes with the laptop perched on his stomach and like a margarita in one hand, and he'll be giving analysis. But if we have to, we will go live.
Hey, if you guys want to do a pop-up show, I'll get out of I'm definitely going to be jumping in the lake. Like again, I am schwitzing like I don't think I've schwitzed like this since we were in Florida, Dave.
Oh God, as you're so hot right now that your screen is starting to fog up.
That's right. I think you got some sweat droplets covering your screen there, big boy. So we'll let you go cool off. We'll remind you Wednesday night expansion draft coverage back here on our YouTube channel. Friday night, first round of the NHL draft back here on our YouTube channel. Saturday, 10 a.m., not 9, 10 second day coverage of the NHL draft back here on our YouTube channel. And then next Wednesday, our free agency recap show back here on our YouTube channel and all of our social media platforms. Big thanks to Sean Reynolds. Big thanks to Craig Button. A big thank you to our sponsors. They make this show possible. Rumors Restaurant and Comedy Club, Linden Market Dental Center, Bernstein's Deli, Zappia Group Realty, Boston Pizza, and Seagram's. Support these fine businesses. They make this show possible. Go out, give them your business because they support Illegal Curve Hockey. Big thanks for all of you for joining us in the chat today. A great conversation was had. We'll see you all back here again on Wednesday. For Ezra Ginsburg, for Dave Minuk, I am your host, Drew Mindell. If it's Saturday, it's the Illegal Curve Hockey Show live on our YouTube channel and all of our social media platforms.